Some weapons are only found in the hands of those who are privileged. They are divine weapons. These weapons are the materialization of a person's soul. Thanks to this, these pieces of equipment are endowed with unique abilities. A noble family once defeated the evil god, the Catastrophe Duchy. From birth, its members have everything: bodies built for combat, exceptional talent for battle, and divine weapons that are truly incredible. The protagonist was born into this family and dreams of becoming a great hero one day, proudly wielding the divine weapons he possesses. At least that's how it should have been. But during the oracle ceremony, when one's divine weapon manifests, he ended up discovering that he wouldn't have one. It was the first time in the history of his family that this had happened, making him the first great failure. Because of this, he was considered inferior and suffered constant humiliation, being called a public embarrassment. The family's second son, Zane, was naturally unsympathetic. To him, useless people like the protagonist who failed to attain a divine weapon did not belong in that place. He used this as an excuse to massage the protagonist's face in an unintentional manner, performing temporary facial harmonization sessions on him. Jessica and Sarah also watched, doing nothing. Jessica, in particular, seemed to enjoy the humiliation sessions. Sarah, on the other hand, did not like what was happening. She tried to intervene in some way, attempting to stop it, but Jessica made her trip and fall to the ground. She did this because Sarah had been called there to observe, to witness what happens to those who are weak and have no future. She was not supposed to intervene. Seeing Jessica step on his friend's head made him worried, but he was in the middle of an involuntary massage session and was reminded of that. His aggressor said that filthy hybrids are too attached to each other. While beating the protagonist, he continued to insult him with words. They were children of concubines, so they were constantly humiliated by the others, being called mutts. After being beaten, he apologized for not being able to protect Sarah as he was too weak. With a big smile on her face, the girl told him not to worry, as she had promised to always stand by his side. But the boy did not want to remain in this situation. He told her that he would become stronger and stronger, even if he did not possess a divine weapon. He also promised that he would protect her with his own life. After embracing each other, she thanked him for making that promise. And he was unable to live up to that promise because just a few days later, he was banished from the family. He immediately began to grieve, overwhelmed by rage. Because he knew that she would be persecuted, he needed to become strong enough to take her out of that place. Mastering skills with a normal weapon was useless against a knight with a divine weapon, so he had to become even stronger. In truth, he had no other option available. He placed a bag full of money on the counter of that shop. Showing the gold coins, he said he would take one weapon of each type, an unusual request. The shopkeeper thought the boy was about to start a personal war. 2 years had passed since he had been exiled from his family. Riding a horse, he continued his journey. The boy had learned a few things, but he still did not have a divine weapon. Before him stood several enemies, dangerous monsters. He had many weapons to use against them. He was also eager to finally begin the fight, because he had mastered all of them, becoming formidable. He even had a firearm, ideal for collecting debts from delinquent borrowers. There was nothing the creatures could do against him. At the end of the battle, a hooded man seemed to be watching everything, until he finally decided to speak to the boy. He wanted to know if that boy always carried all those weapons, and if this was the concern of someone who had failed to obtain a divine weapon. He had already forgotten about the trap he had set and was looking for someone he could trust. Someone with enough potential to eventually become a great hero. The protagonist could only have one impression of this mysterious figure. His conversation seemed like the ramblings of a madman, but an intense blue glow appeared in the man's hand, firing a bolt of energy toward the boy. A shining object was in front of him. It looked like a weapon, leaving the protagonist genuinely impressed by what was happening. The man said he would trust the boy, leaving that weapon with him. Still embedded in the ground, the object glowed while releasing energy. He thought it might be a sword and started to approach it, until he finally touched it with his hand, only to realize that what he had received was just the sword's scabbard. The Divine Sheath of Avalon, an item that allows its user to store their divine weapon and pass it on to another person. Passed down from generation to generation, it now holds the weapons of those who were the 5 greatest in history. Whoever is able to wield it will have the best armaments on the planet. The boy's determination is focused on achieving complete mastery of that item. Since that event, 3 years had passed. He was with his mentor and a dragon soared across the sky. The creature charged at them, furious. It had prepared its flames ready to annihilate all living beings from the face of the earth. But that heat was not a concern for the protagonist, who remained unimpressed. He immediately invoked Avalon and the white sheath appeared in his hand. He held it as if he were about to unsheath a sword. Focusing, he commanded the power to manifest. Then, an intense glow appeared on the sacred item. And in the boy's hand, another glow emerged. Until in his grasp, the windshield of Achilles took form. Powerful enough to generate an effective protective barrier against the dragon's attack. To counterattack, he invoked the Storm Hammer Mjolnir. He was properly positioned to annihilate the creature, leaping onto the dragon with the hammer ready to deliver a massive blow. The strike was powerful and crushing, slamming the creature's head into the ground. A single hit was enough. His mentor declared that he had mastered Avalon. He told him that he could now go to his sister, as not even an S-rank paladin would be able to stop him. Hearing these words, hope filled the protagonist's eyes. With great joy, he said he would do as instructed. 5 years had passed since he was banished, and now he had more than enough power to rescue his sister. As he advanced, he hoped that Sarah was safe, because he was on his way to her, to rescue her from that despicable place. However, upon reaching the region, he saw that fire had consumed everything. He did not know what could have happened and immediately became very worried. Amidst the flames, he saw several banners raised. He quickly recognized those symbols. They belonged to another duchy, the Roth-Windsor. A fierce battle was underway, a civil war. This was definitely not good. He'd rushed into the castle, desperately searching for his sister, approaching a massive gate that was already slightly open. But upon entering the hall, he was met with a heartbreaking scene. A severely wounded body lay on the ground. It couldn't be possible that this had happened. That was the body of his dear sister. He took her into his arms, deeply concerned. The girl showed no reaction. It was possible that the worst had already come to pass. He remembered the words he had spoken to her and the promise he had failed to keep. Completely devastated, a desperate scream filled the air of that place. After perfecting his power, he had been unable to accomplish the one thing that had motivated him all these years. A bolt of energy was coming straight for him. It passed through the boy's body. His chest had been pierced. There was another presence there with them. That menacing mana, it was undoubtedly from a warrior of S-rank level. The man knew that this was Bell, the one who had been banished, but the boy could not understand how he had been recognized. But that no longer mattered, because he would now join his sister in the afterlife. This was definitely the person who had taken his sister's life. Raising his blade, he was ready to end the protagonist's life, who was completely consumed by his destructive grief. But already weakened, he could do nothing. His chest was pierced even more violently. After these grim events, he found himself before the priest once more. Looking at his hands, he did not understand how he had been sent to that place. That stained glass window was familiar. He was inside his family's cathedral. The ceremony was taking place, and he was certain that he had died. If this was the ceremony, then there was only one explanation. He had returned in time. The priest instructed him to clasp his hands together and visualize his divine equipment. But the boy knew what happened the first time. At this point in his life, he had not yet inherited Avalon and was already expecting to be banished so he could restart his journey once again. But something different happened, leaving him astonished. There was no doubt. What stood before his eyes was Avalon. He believed that this time he would do everything again. With the power he now possessed, he would be able to change fate. Now his real life was about to begin. The boy looked at the sheath in his hands, fully aware of the potential it held. It was something so unusual that even the priest, who had never seen anything like it before, had something to say about it. Anticipating what the priest would say, he already knew fighting with a sheath would not be possible. As he was caught off guard, the priest said that wasn't what he had been planning to say. Even so, the boy, overflowing with confidence, assured him not to worry. That was the greatest divine weapon in existence. Now walking through the castle corridors, he was searching for his sister. If he had returned to the past, she must still be alive. His past life was still very recent, and he was deeply worried about Sarah. At last, he reached the door to her room. A girl sitting by the window heard the door open. Sarah welcomed him with a wide smile. Indeed, she was alive and well. She radiated the same beauty he remembered. Seeing her brother, whom she hadn't expected, the girl approached him to give him a hug. She also wanted to know how his ceremony had gone. The boy didn't even respond. He was just overjoyed that she was still alive. That hug was so sudden that Sarah wondered if something had happened to her brother. He still regretted not being able to save her in his previous life. The memory of that pain was still too intense for him. He would not allow his sister to go through that suffering again, for now he could finally fulfill his promise. It didn't take long for the girl to complain about the hug. It was too tight. Even so, it was fine. She was happy to have received it. Only then did she notice something on the boy's face. Tears were streaming down his eyes, and she didn't know why. Running her hand over his head, she comforted him and told him everything would be fine because they had each other. Hearing those words warmed the boy's heart. Apparently, he had grown up in Alabama. His obnoxious brother also entered the room, noticing how well the Mutts were getting along. He had been looking for Belle for some time. That was Zane, the true sadist. The little jerk said he had already heard the news. His brother had received a peculiar item during the ceremony. Apparently, the priest loved meddling in others' affairs, a true gossip. Bell confirmed that he had received his sheath. His brother couldn't hide his contempt. Laughing uncontrollably, he said his sheath wasn't a weapon, and it suited that poor soul perfectly. He would never be able to fight with that, and the two of them together were truly idiots. The protagonist had to clench his fist. He was tempted to perform an unsanctioned orthodontic procedure on the little jerk. Instead, he gave him a chance to take back his words. But the little jerk didn't understand his stance. He wasn't used to seeing his half-brother stand up for himself, so the protagonist warned him again to take back what he had said. Sensing that this was a challenge, the little jerk was filled with even more hatred. Now he would teach the concubine's son a lesson. Unfortunately for the little jerk, the protagonist had years of intense training with his mentor. Landing a powerful strike to his stomach, he ensured the boy would reflect on his actions from now on. The poor kid only avoided vomiting his lunch because the food had already passed the point of no return. He collapsed onto the ground, curled up. Maybe he had felt the blow to his liver and his blood pressure had dropped. Looking down at the little jerk, the protagonist advised him not to threaten Sarah again, or he might be forcefully re-educated in proper manners. Frustrated, the little jerk called his half-brother a bastard. Now he was going to take the violence to the next level. With his divine weapon, he promised to make his brother beg for forgiveness. He would scorch his skin. Seeing that the little jerk wanted a serious fight, then so be it. He told Sarah to step back, things were about to get fun. But he reassured her first, telling her everything would be fine. He would handle this situation with ease. Preparing for battle, he summoned the mighty Avalon into his hand. Now he was armed with the mysterious sheath. His brother refused to believe he could be defeated by an object that wasn't even a weapon. After all, he was already an E-rank paladin. A bastard like him would never stand a chance. That was somewhat relevant. Paladins were divided into ranks. Everything depended on their strength. Upon receiving their divine weapon, they were automatically classified as F rank. By channeling mana into their weapon, they advanced to E rank. From D rank and above, that same mana could be used for special attacks. To surpass B rank, one had to master the unique abilities of their equipment. It was bizarre that the little jerk was bragging about being E rank. He still had a long way to go. The protagonist didn't even feel challenged by this. His overwhelming confidence only made the little jerk even more furious. Being even more provocative, he said his brother was being very cute. That was the last straw. He was going to strike the mutt with overwhelming force. Sarah became worried, certain that things could take a dangerous turn. Placing his hands on the sheath, he invoked the Sword of Light. Before them appeared Caliburn, a truly formidable sword. The little jerk couldn't believe it. His weapon's flames were useless against that. Not to mention, he had no idea what that sword even was. The counterattack caused the little jerk to lose his balance. Even more surprising was that his divine weapon had been cut by that sword. The boy looked on in fear, realizing he had been completely overpowered. Still unable to comprehend what happened, he was sure there had been nothing inside that sheath. Approaching him, the protagonist wanted to know if he was satisfied, or if he would prefer to beg for forgiveness now. Like a true sore loser, he claimed he had been tricked. He didn't know the boy was armed. If he had known, he wouldn't have attacked because he was a coward. He even managed to threaten him, saying he wouldn't forget this. Then he fled the room, terrified and with his underwear completely obliterated. The protagonist made sure to follow him. This wasn't over yet. Now in his hand was a fire-spitting lead dispenser at Ragnarok. With the little jerk in his sights, he fired a single shot. The poor soul tried to escape, realizing the bullet had passed dangerously close to his face, striking the wall right in front of him. Staring at the hole left by the bullet, he became even more frightened. Everything was becoming more and more confusing for him. It made no sense. How could the boy now be wielding a different weapon? He had just used a sword. It was impossible for him to have more than one divine weapon. The protagonist advised him not to forget this. You shouldn't provoke Sira again. Either way, it was up to him to decide what he would do from now on. And the little jerk had no more underwear left to ruin. His fear only grew. With cold eyes like a lone shark collecting debts from defaulters, he warned that the consequences of the little jerk's actions could earn him a hole in his forehead. Desperate, the little jerk ran off to save his own life while the protagonist put away his divine weapon. Sarah, who had seen everything, was absolutely amazed. She was fine, but she wanted to know if those weapons were her brother's divine armament. So he reminded her. He had already told her she could leave everything in his hands. The girl found that really cool, and all the protagonist wanted was to continue protecting that beautiful smile. He would never lose to anyone again. Elsewhere, the little jerk went to report what had happened. He had gone straight to his father, telling the Duke that he had been humiliated like a dog. The Duke was intrigued that Belle had received multiple divine weapons. The little jerk insisted that it wasn't normal. Belle must have made a pact with Beelzebub the lone shark, and because of that, he should be banished immediately. But the Duke ignored his words. He was too engrossed in the possibilities of having a powerful heir. Rising from his throne, he completely disregarded the little jerk. Asking where his father was going, he learned that he was heading to see Belle. He needed to confirm for himself if this was really true. After that event, the boy needed to rest for a while. He went to his bed to recover. He had won the battle. He was still in the body of a child. He was extremely exhausted as he still couldn't control his mana with mastery. That should have been a fire shot, but it ended up being a regular shot. He was definitely still at F rank. He needed to improve his strength, but he knew he couldn't remain at this power level. He began to recall the battle he had witnessed. It was the Rothwindsers. That symbol belonged to them. They were a family with whom they had an old rivalry. Anything could have been the spark that ignited that conflict. Surely the one who had attacked him must have been from that family. But this time, things would be different. He would protect his sister. And to do that, he also needed to be more respected within his own family. The doors to his room swung open. The boy looked at the one who had entered. It had been a while since they had last seen each other, and he had no idea why his father was there. Galleon had accomplished great feats in the grand battle that took place 20 years ago. Alone, he had fought against the evil god. He carved his path through the dark continent, using only his sword. He was recognized by many as the Saint of the Sword, and standing beside his father was the little jerk. Now he understood the reason his father had come. He was definitely being accused of something, but this was the perfect situation for him. The fastest way to be valued was to be noticed by the head of the family. Bowing, he showed respect to the Duke. The old man said the boy had changed a lot since the last time they met, but this time, he had come to him as a father and asked him to relax. With great maturity, Belle said that wasn't possible. Just one word could be misunderstood, and he needed to be responsible before the Duke. The old man was smitten by the maturity of the snot-nosed kid. He asked the boy to stand up, and so he did. And he would do as the boy suggested. He would remain there as the Duke. Immediately, his presence became overwhelming. The Duke's pressure was terrifying. He had learned that his sons had fought, and conflicts between siblings were forbidden. Belle showed a hint of regret, and the little jerk believed he would soon see the bastard being punished. No one in that house could remain standing under the Duke's power. But the boy had already steadied himself. He said that he and his younger sister had been harassed. Hearing this confession, the Duke asked if his orders had been violated over childishness. The boy confirmed once again and added that he had no regrets. And the Duke wanted to know if he truly didn't regret disobeying his orders. Belle said that abandoning those he loved was an even greater disgrace for a paladin. He would fight to protect his sister, even if his opponent was his older brother. As he spoke, the Duke observed him intently. This was the path of the knight he wished to walk. The Duke pointed the tip of his sword at him. He asked what he would do if his opponent were him. But the boy held his ground. He wouldn't hesitate, even if his opponent was the Duke himself. The old man tried to intimidate him with his gaze, but he ended up liking his son's resilience. He said that he would let this incident be ignored, much to the little jerk's dismay. And looking at him, he was disappointed that Zane had harassed his own sister and then lost a fight. The little jerk hadn't expected to be put in his place like that. The Duke told him he should be ashamed and not show his face before him. He understood Belle's choice and acknowledged that it was courageous of him to say that, knowing the consequences of his words. The boy apologized for being reckless, but his father said that was the attitude he expected from catastrophe knights. Now he wanted the boy to show him his power. He asked to see his divine armament. The boy did as requested. A blue light began to emerge between his hands, and the Duke was even more impressed. That sheath was Avalon, his divine armament. But to the Duke, that made no sense. He had heard rumors of the legendary weapon that carried the spirit of the original paladin. It was wielded by great heroes throughout history. He asked if it was true that the boy had used both a sword and a firearm, and Belle confirmed it. He said those weapons resided within Avalon. To prove his words, he showed both to his father. Immediately, the Duke began to wonder if this was even possible. And to his total surprise, he heard that the boy could only use 2 at a time, but there were 3 more weapons in the sheath. That son of his was definitely destined to be the next hero. He told him that he had no interest in the weak, but from now on, he had high expectations for his future. As he left the room, he told him to keep working hard. The doors finally closed, and the boy could rest. That pressure had been overwhelming. He just needed to keep improving, but it was a shame he had a child's body. He needed to reach D rank as quickly as possible, and for that, he had to hunt monsters to absorb more mana. He would head to the nearest forest to hunt some orcs. Night had finally fallen, and the head of one of the creatures lay on the ground separated from its body. In the forest, the slaughter continued. There was nothing the creatures could do, because something far fiercer was there. The beast's teeth were as sharp as iron swords. It roared furiously, asserting its dominance. That forest certainly brought back nostalgic memories. After being banished in his past life, he had trained there for some time, but something felt strange. He had been walking for a while and hadn't encountered any monsters yet. From within the bushes, a creature watched him. He finally came across some orcs, but they were in pieces. Their remains were now part of the forest's decor. It was a scene as terrifying as it was unusual, and as he tried to make sense of it, he was suddenly startled by a terrifying sound. The boy turned around to see what it was. An attack was already in motion, and he had to defend himself. The force was greater than his own, sending him flying. This was not the creature he wanted to encounter. That was definitely Fenrir. The reason there were no monsters in the forest was because of this D-rank creature. He barely had any mana left and was, at most, at E rank. It would be great if he could leave immediately, but looking into the creature's eyes, he knew he would be executed on the spot. The boy needed to stay alert to avoid becoming dog food. Caught off guard, he realized the monster's speed was greater than he had expected. He had to throw himself out of the way of the attack. In his hands, he summoned the fire-spitting pistol, firing several shots at the creature. But it managed to dodge them all. Now he was in real trouble, without a doubt. Since his mana was still low, his bullets weren't fast enough. The firearm wouldn't be effective. He needed to try something else. With his sword in hand, he charged at his attacker. The beast's clawed paw was a formidable threat. But the boy managed to dodge that devastating strike, and because of that, he found an opening that could work in his favor. He struck at the creature, but it managed to evade as well. Something impressive. He hadn't expected that. He needed to rethink his strategy. He was facing a real risk. If he were at his peak power, the forest dog would have already been annihilated. The wolf charged at him once again, furious. Belle knew he couldn't match that speed, so he had to stand his ground and defend against the attack. Because of that, he ended up taking some damage. He was cornered now. He couldn't escape the barrage of attacks. Slowly, he was being overwhelmed by the creature, which advanced toward him, ready to have him as his afternoon snack. Remembering that he had just reincarnated, he couldn't allow his life to end so soon. He had to summon Achilles' shield. That way, he could both defend and counterattack. However, the creature's agility was formidable, and it caught him off guard from the side. The boy fell, losing his grip on the shield. The fight couldn't continue at this pace, or he would end up as that aggressive dog's next meal. The weapons he had used so far had been completely ineffective, and using the hammer against it would also be difficult since its attacks were too slow. Only one weapon remained to try. With no other choice, he had to use it immediately. The creature was ready to finish him off. The boy closed his eyes, focusing. Just as he was about to be struck, he called Aegis to himself. But the creature's attack had already been executed. Unexpectedly, nothing happened. A gauntlet was now in his hand, wrapped in dark energy. He hadn't wanted to use it, but it was better than dying a second time. The creature was prepared to attack once again. In fact, it had become even faster. But the battle was already over. The boy had also become much faster. With the hammer in hand, he was now above the creature. It wouldn't be able to keep up with him now, and the hammer was already prepared to crush skulls. A precise and devastating blow struck the creature, which writhed in agony, its teeth rearranging themselves in its mouth. Aegis was the gauntlet of darkness. It increased the physical strength of its wielder. But that wasn't all. Whoever used it would begin to hear a voice giving them orders to destroy. The wolf was still alive and even more furious. As time passed, the wielder only grew stronger, and his desire to take lives intensified. He eagerly awaited the creature's next approach, dodging all the attacks coming his way. Now the wolf was at a disadvantage, and the boy seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself. At last, the wolf no longer belonged to the world of the living. The protagonist was relieved to have ended it quickly. That weapon couldn't be removed in battle, and its effects grew stronger over time, dragging its user into darkness. Now he needed to understand why there was a Fenrir in that forest. While he was thinking, he noticed something different about the hammer. It seemed to be completely charged with energy. By defeating the creature, he could now use its attributes. Defeating powerful creatures was better than taking down weak monsters. He couldn't wait to test it out. In the castle garden, his sister enjoyed the afternoon under the shade of a tree. At last, the flower crown was complete. She hoped her brother would like the gift, but someone snatched the crown from her hands. The girl sneered, saying the flower crown was hideous, but that was fitting for a filthy girl like the one who made it. That wretched girl's name was Jessica. She wanted to know what Spencer thought about it. The bizarre-looking boy agreed with Jessica. He was there only to obey her. As she tossed the flower crown into the air, it was immediately destroyed. Spencer had used a whip to do it. Sarah didn't like that, but she was defenseless. Jessica was bored. There was nothing to do there. With a weapon in hand, she invited Sarah to go with her. It was time for her to practice and improve her aim, firing a shot at the girl, who cowered in fear. Bell appeared, blocking the shot with his sheath, declaring that he would play with Jessica instead. Sarah was shocked. She hadn't seen him arrive. In fact, she was completely unaware of her surroundings. She never noticed anyone coming. Bell said he was also looking for an excuse to test his divine armament. But Jessica didn't understand what was happening. No mutt was going to get in her way. Bell was too busy trying to comfort his sister, telling her everything would be fine. And now he had something to take care of with the arrogant girl. The boy with the horrendous hair tried to position himself in an intimidating stance. Bell knew that this guy was some kind of servant to Jessica, so he made sure to stand before him as the son of the Duke. But he wasn't about to show respect to someone who was the son of a concubine. That only irritated the protagonist. Jessica wanted to know why he was so confident since he was weak and only got lucky defeating Zane. They believed the protagonist had just been lucky and that Zane had been careless. And since he was only using a sheath as a weapon, he must be the weakest of the weak. Closing his eyes, he told her it would be better if she saw for herself. Whether what he had was luck or talent, Jessica hadn't expected any of this. She became uneasy, ordering Spencer to take care of that trash immediately, something he would do with great pleasure. Wherever his whip struck, ice formed. Even so, Bell wasn't impressed. Spencer was a D-rank paladin, and his divine armament was an ice whip. He was much stronger than the little jerk who was only E-rank. But the protagonist was the protagonist. The boy said he would freeze his victim's legs so he couldn't escape, then his arms and body until he couldn't move at all, ending with slaps to his face until it was unrecognizable. Bell said he talked too much. And now the side character would be reminded that he was a side character. Spencer warned him not to underestimate him. Now he would turn him into an ice pop. The whip lashed toward Bell, but the boy easily dodged it. Jessica couldn't believe he had managed to do that. For a D-rank paladin, he wasn't bad, but he was still just a side character. And the protagonist had trained relentlessly in his past life. This was nothing more than a child's pastime. Sarah was even more impressed. Her brothers seemed to be dancing. Meanwhile, Spencer became deeply irritated, saying his victim only knew how to run. So Bell would show him that he wasn't running away. From now on, he wouldn't dodge anymore. Everyone there was shocked by his overwhelming confidence. Bell wanted to see if the arrogant fool could follow through on his threats. Spencer fell for the provocation and charged to attack. Now he would freeze him completely. The whip struck toward Bell, who stood with his arms open. It hit him multiple times, but nothing happened. Sarah became very worried. The ice finally formed. His arms and legs were now frozen. If he couldn't move, it was time for Spencer to strike his face. Bell wanted to know if that was all he could do, because if it was, then it was his turn to attack. Spencer hesitated at those words. Bell immediately called for Ragnarok. The sheath at his waist began to glow, and a firearm appeared in his hand. To the arrogant fool, it was impossible that he had two divine weapons. To break free from the ice, Bell started releasing his mana, and from the gun, fire began to emerge. Now he was free to move again. Jessica couldn't believe Bell had done that. It wasn't possible that he had two divine armaments, let alone that he could use their attributes so effectively. And now it was time to deliver punishment to this arrogant existence. He fired intense flames at Spencer. Spencer knew he was in trouble. He tried to defend himself using his ice whip, coating his body in ice, believing that would be enough to block the approaching flames. Bell knew this wouldn't even be difficult. The fire kept advancing. The bullet completely pierced through that block of ice. Spencer couldn't believe he was about to be crushed so violently. The projectile struck his chest with tremendous force. The impact didn't pierce through him, but it caused considerable damage. He fell to the ground to Jessica's horror. The mud had shattered the ice and defeated a E-rank paladin. And since she was only E-rank, she knew she had no chance at all. The protagonist looked at her. He told her it was all over now. The girl summoned her divine armament. She told him not to come any closer. The fear was so overwhelming that she couldn't hold her weapon without trembling. She fired multiple shots at him but missed every single one. Desperate, she begged him not to come any closer. But her feet were hesitant. She fell on her own, as fear was the most abundant thing in that place. Bell remained standing before her. Jessica's fear continued to grow. Before her stood someone who could end her life if he wished. Firmly, he warned her not to bother Sierra again. The girl couldn't respond, she was paralyzed. All she could do was flee while she still had time. Sarah ran up to her brother, extremely grateful. She wanted to know if the whip had hurt him, but he said Spencer was so weak it was pitiful. Sarah praised Belle's strength, but he told her he was only strong so he could protect her. She showed him the flower crown she had made since the other one had been destroyed. Placing it on Belle's head, she thanked him for always being there to protect her. Belle had received a gift from his sister. One day, he would make the whole nation revere this kind soul. The problem was that everyone that despised the children of concubines, improving his worth would be difficult. He needed to earn respect. And for that, there was something he had to achieve immediately. Outside the palace stood the Duke, meditating while holding his sword. His concentration was truly impressive. After some time, he executed a few cuts in the air. He was able to slice through the fallen leaves. Only then did he notice that Belle had approached him. He asked what the boy wanted by coming to him. Belle had come to request the Duke's permission. Interested, the Duke asked what the boy wished to ask for. Before making his request, he knelt before the Duke. The Duke was impressed by such formality. Belle wanted to take the admission exam for C rank. The Duke seemed intrigued by the boy's request. Belle said he wished to serve the king as a member of his house. To ensure the duchy remained recognized, his family had obligations to the royal family, such as escorting missions and eliminating monsters. Doing this was the fastest way for him to gain status within his own family. That way, he would earn recognition by completing difficult tasks. To obtain the best missions, he needed to take this exam. Looking at the boy, the Duke realized he had great ambitions, but he made it clear that it was still too early for him to take that exam. He should first become a full-fledged paladin before even considering C rank. And at the moment, he was only at F rank, having just received his divine armament. He should focus on the E rank exam first. What the Duke didn't expect was that the boy had something to show him. Presenting a fang to him, Belle asked if it was enough to change his mind. The Duke knew exactly what that was. It was a Fenrir fang. Immediately, he asked how the boy had obtained such an item. Without hesitation, Belle showed him one of his divine weapons. The hammer was now charged with intense electricity. Belle admitted it had been a bit difficult, but he had managed to discipline that stubborn mutt. Seeing the energy surrounding that hammer, the Duke realized the boy could already use attributes. Moreover, he had managed to defeat a D-rank creature. The boy was truly strong and should be eligible for the C-rank exam. He would allow the boy to take the exam under one condition. He was not to even consider the possibility of disappointing the duchy. Filled with confidence and gratitude, Belle assured him he never would. At the exam site, he noticed several candidates had gathered. This was because C-rank was a wall for many people, completely insurmountable. The small boy caught the attention of the other candidates. Many of them were already adults, while he was just a child. He made his way to the exam reception. The attendant wanted to know who he was and if he was there with his father, but she was surprised to learn that he was there to take the exam himself. She suggested he return when he was older. The boy asked not to be treated like a child as he was also a paladin. As they spoke, someone approached Belle, telling him to stop playing pretend as a paladin. Little kids like him shouldn't be in this place. He should leave immediately. The protagonist had no idea what this person's problem was, but he was sure it would be a problem. The others there knew exactly who this figure was. His name was Lennox, and he was currently the strongest D-rank paladin. It was said that his divine armament, the Wind Sword, executed 8 slashes every time it was wielded, a truly impressive ability, and he already had numerous fans. Lennox warned that if the child wanted to take the exam, he should at least be as good as him. Belle didn't even know this guy was famous among his peers. Meanwhile, this new side character doubted whether the protagonist even had a divine armament. Holding the sheath at his waist, Belle said it was right there with him. Seeing that it was just a sheath, the young man began to laugh, thinking it must be impossible to fight with such trash. Other side characters started laughing as well. They never imagined that divine armaments could be so useless, and they were grateful they weren't as pathetic. Lennox said he didn't care if an ignorant child wanted to throw his life away like that, but it annoyed him that his participation in the exam put them on the same level as if they were equals. Taking his leave, he warned that the little piece of trash should return to his mother's lap. With the annoyance session over, Belle told the secretary to register him immediately. She wanted to know if he was sure about this, but he was unwavering. For that, he needed a recommendation from a B-rank knight or higher, as well as being at least D-rank himself. With that recommendation letter, he should be able to participate, resolving all issues. The girl knew that it was highly unlikely that anyone would recommend a child, but as she read the letter, she realized it came from the Duke of Catastrophe himself. Only then did she realize that the child before her was also the Duke's son. The participants gathered in the arena, the place where the exam would take place. The instructor began giving instructions on how the exam would work. First, they would be transported into a dungeon using that teleportation stone. They would have 5 hours to return with the Jewel of Light. In total, there were 3 of them inside the dungeon. Only those who managed to obtain the jewels would be promoted. The arrogant side character was convinced he was destined to be one of the winners. The competition before him looked intimidated, while the protagonist felt embarrassed on his behalf. After the explanation, the instructor asked if everyone was ready. Seeing the enthusiastic response from the group, the exam was set to begin immediately. It was the protagonist's turn to enter the dungeon through the teleportation stone. The rooms began to glow intensely, and he found himself transported to a completely different place. It was as if he had passed through a portal. He was finally inside the cave. It seemed that everyone had been sent to different locations on the first floor, so he needed to decide which road to take. Although the dungeon was large, he had plenty of time to complete it, and since he had the opportunity, it would be a waste not to make the best use of it. There were many creatures in this dungeon, and the more monsters he defeated, the greater his mana would become. Immediately, he gripped his sword, determined to hunt every creature that existed there. Inside the dungeon, the other candidates were struggling to defeat the creatures. They were formidable and highly dangerous. The eyes of those lizards were terrifying and violent, more than enough to intimidate the weak. The arrogant side character didn't understand why the others were struggling against such weak creatures. He could annihilate them with a wide grin, as it didn't require much effort on his part. His feats earned him the admiration of the others, and he continued to defeat the monsters. Overconfident, he declared that he wasn't mediocre like the rest. To be honest, he found the difficulty frustrating. The side characters were happy to follow him, as they would remain safe. Accompanied by them, Lennox warned that they would have the privilege of witnessing his skills firsthand, and that weaklings like them were only good for wandering around. After exploring the dungeon for a while, the group encountered a massive door. That must be the final chamber. He hoped he could find some real entertainment. Unexpectedly, there were multiple D-rank monsters in that place, and the jewels were positioned on an altar at the far end of the room. One of the creatures began walking toward the group. Lennox was confident he could slice it to pieces, delivering multiple slashes toward the monster. But his body was so tough and resilient that it took no damage at all. It was time for the creature to counterattack. For the first time in the dungeon, the arrogant side character found himself under pressure from one of the monsters. The blow was so strong that he lost his balance, but he was still shocked that his attacks had no effect at all. Even the other side characters couldn't believe what was happening. They immediately became worried because the other creatures had now focused on them. The guy from Clava had to act quickly to save his own life. He managed to strike one of the monsters attacking him, only to realize that physical attacks were completely useless against it. Meanwhile, the woman was struggling against the flying creature. This particular monster could attack with its feathers without even needing to get close. Lennox finally realized the difficulty level of this final exam stage. There was a monster capable of resisting each of their divine abilities. Against that stone creature, he was completely ineffective. Terrified and unable to act, he closed his eyes, expecting the worst. But the terrifying creature was destroyed before it could land a blow on the candidate. He opened his eyes, still in shock. Bell was relieved. If he had arrived a little later, the worst would have happened. He had quite a bit of fun while hunting, but Lennox immediately recognized him. It was the little piece of trash taking the exam. A monster immune to physical attacks was approaching him. Bell had to change strategies to deal with that creature. The sword was the ideal weapon for this. Lennox was surprised that the boy's divine armament had transformed. Bell finished off that creature with a single strike. Now he had to deal with the one flying in the air. He had the perfect equipment for that, capable of firing multiple shots. Riddling the creature's body with bullets, he turned it into a winged sieve. The other side characters couldn't believe that the boy was truly strong, considering that his divine armament was just an empty sheath. Lennox had no idea how it was possible for him to have multiple divine armaments. Not to mention, the boy had immense mastery over each one. Since time was short, he had to finish off the creatures quickly. Watching from the sidelines, the arrogant side character couldn't believe that a child could be this skilled. While he remained in shock, the protagonist continued defeating the creatures. With everything properly taken care of, he just needed to collect one of the jewels. He finally reached the altar where they were positioned. The side characters approached him, ready to start their flattery session, something the protagonist found incredibly annoying. They quickly revealed their toxic nature by belittling the one they had been worshipping just moments ago. They said that compared to the child, he was absolute trash, and they had always been wrong about him. Lennox's confidence had been completely shattered by that experience. The two side characters believed they would claim the remaining 2 jewels. Without saying a word, Bell summoned his hammer. He had already obtained the necessary jewel for his own approval, and he was ready to do something very entertaining. He struck the altar with a powerful blow, to the shock of the 2 groveling side characters. They asked what the hell he had done. He had destroyed the remaining jewels. Showing them the only jewel left, he told them that if they wanted it so badly, they just had to come and get it, adding that besides being useless, they were just sycophants who leached off other people's talent, people who took pleasure in belittling those who were no longer useful to them. They were unworthy of calling themselves knights. Being scolded by a child utterly devastated their egos. Bell left the room, abandoning the side characters there. Lennox seemed to have learned something from that reprimand. He recognized his weaknesses, admitting that he had been arrogant, and thanked Bell for it. But he wouldn't let that be his downfall. The protagonist found it surprising that he had been honest and had ambitions, confirming that one day they would meet again. Outside, the boy celebrated. He was finally a C-rank knight, and since he had hunted many monsters, his mana had increased significantly. Now he just needed to gain respect within his own household to be able to protect his sister. At last, he arrived at the Duke's residence to share the news. But the Duke seemed to be in the middle of a serious meeting. There were knights planning to overthrow the Meldia family. 3 B-rank paladins were approaching their lands, and the Duke's family had been tasked with eliminating them. It seemed that another noble family had had trouble with these paladins. Rumors suggested that these knights had enchanted their weapons with forbidden spells. The B-rank paladins now understood why they had been summoned there. The Duke declared that they could not allow karma to continue like this. They had to eradicate them immediately. One of the knights noticed someone was missing. Jin wasn't there with them. Placing a book on the table, a young man asked what the meeting was about. Immediately, the others turned to see who it was. The young man declared that this organization had already been annihilated, because he, the one who would become the next Duke, would be the reason for it. Meanwhile, one of the maids was bringing a meal to her lady, informing her that the food had arrived. Sarah prepares to sit at the table. Being very polite, she thanked the woman for her work, who left the room not giving any importance to this gratitude. Sarah seems to be very sad. She looks at her meal without any enthusiasm. Finally, her brother enters the room, announcing that he had arrived. He looks at her with great joy. Sarah responds in the same way. She does not know where he had gone and was very worried. Belle informed her that he had to take care of something important and that he brought gifts for her. On the table now lies a complete meal. Sarah was very happy with the apple pie that had been brought, and she hopes to eat all of it in the company of her brother. But that is not the time to enjoy his sister's company. The food is always the same, since even the servants despise the children of concubines. He needs to work hard to improve his sister's quality of life immediately. The meeting with the Duke is still in progress. He is impressed that one of his sons managed to defeat Karma alone. This can only mean that Jin has already reached level A. As expected from the Duke's eldest son, he is on another level. After that, he also sat at the table. He wants to know if his father has anything else to say. He said that the king had assigned another task to their family. They were to escort Princess Rilke Schurig-Villain. She would pass through a city near the duchy, and they should ensure her a safe journey. One of the knights wondered if the royal guard was not enough. Another said that the royal family should not yet be informed that Karma was no longer a problem. Thus, the safest route should pass through Rikata. While they were talking, another person entered the hall. The boy asked them to wait before making a decision. His appearance caught everyone's attention. The knights know that this is Belle. The Duke could not deny that he was very pleased with his son's talent. It seemed that the exam was already over. Showing his certificate, the boy confirmed that he now belonged to level C. It is impressive that he achieved this at such a young age. Now, the Duke wanted to know why he interrupted them. He wanted to suggest a different route for this journey. One of the knights was surprised that a boy had something to suggest. The route that passes through Rikata has no monsters, which is why there are so many bandits, and the journey would take 3 days. It would be better if the trip passed through the monster plain. One of the knights warned that that place was definitely dangerous, but the boy knows the monsters that inhabit that region. Most of them are chimeras and horrors of the dark. Both are nocturnal creatures, so traveling during the day would be much safer. Not to mention, it would take only a single day to reach the destination. The knight, unfortunately, had to agree with this. After listening to the boy, the Duke realized that he was assertive and knew a lot about monsters. Now it remained to be seen what they thought of it. Because the boy wanted to be entrusted with this task, he was confident that he could escort the princess safely. His stance made the Duke remain thoughtful. Finally, Jin made his participation in the dialogue. A threatening energy filled the air. He wanted to know why this mutt was speaking to them. The energy was so intense that even a plant on the table ended up drying out, and the other knights became fearful. Belle had already forgotten how terrifying his older brother's intimidation was. Even so, that was not enough to intimidate him. Revealing his divine armament, he said that he was also very serious, affirming that he would be able to escort the princess safely to her destination no matter what. Intrigued by the boy's confidence, Jin asked if he would be able to stop him. Belle affirmed that a knight keeps his word. Jin's servant ordered the boy to shut his mouth, as his words represented blasphemy against Jin. This was Razor, his brother's secretary, who by now must be a level B paladin. Jin seemed very interested in the boy, and he asked his secretary to put him to the test. Then, he also revealed his divine armament, for he was prepared to beat that child. He was going to teach a lesson to the son of the concubine. Immediately, he began to take steps toward the boy, who seemed very aware of his surroundings even though he had not moved. The secretary was about to deliver the first strike. Belle realized that this could be much more difficult than expected. Even so, he was able to defend himself efficiently, something that left the secretary impressed. Jin also seemed to like what he had seen. That was faster than expected. It is still too early for him to defeat a level B paladin in combat. Firmly and authoritatively, the Duke announced that that was enough, affirming that Belle would be responsible for that task. The secretary asked if the Duke was serious about this. Since Karma had already been annihilated by Jin, this would be an interesting task for a first mission. Belle respectfully thanked him, affirming that he would not disappoint. Jin is watching the boy attentively, but his sinister smile hides something. Belle needed to go to the royal palace. This is the first time he has ever been to that place. He heads to the gates to make his entrance, but he is stopped by the guards, who say he cannot simply walk in. The boy introduces himself, showing his paladin certificate, and informs them that he is responsible for escorting the princess. They have difficulty believing that such a child has already reached level C. Properly identified, he was able to pass through the gates. The guards doubt the child is capable of protecting her highness, but the protagonist remains completely determined. Finally, the princess's carriage arrives. She said that her bodyguard is very cute. She apologized to him, confirming that she would not need his help. The man sitting on the throne wants to know if the princess has already departed. His servant confirms that she must already be on the road. Besides several guards in her company, the Duke's son is also part of her escort. He heard that this son is Belle, who must still be a child. Imagining that he must be extremely talented, he asked his servant to be cautious. authorizing him to use his secret weapon if the situation called for it. Revealing blades in his hands, he stated that there would be no need, because his specialty is eliminating people without them ever realizing it. The carriage continues on its way. Inside it are the princess, the protagonist, and the guards. That task is very simple, but of great importance. Completing it is essential to helping his sister. But there is a catch to this. He does not feel comfortable at all. It seems he has not been well received. Excusing himself for what might be a rude question, he wanted to know why the princess said he would not be necessary. She takes a moment to answer, saying that she does not like to depend on others. She has her own divine armament and is not as weak as people imagine. The boy realized that she is even more arrogant than he had thought. The princess continues looking outside. Inside the city, life goes on as usual. That seems to have sparked something in the princess. She looks outside with great enthusiasm. The boy enjoys seeing her joy, but the princess felt uncomfortable with that. He apologized, stating that she reminds him a lot of his sister, and he is sure she would have reacted the same way looking at all that. The princess asked if they usually get along well. Belle told her that they play a lot when they are together. Since she is still very young, games are simple things. The princess said that she has many siblings but cannot trust any of them. Imagining that it might be due to conflicts over succession, Belle felt sorry for her. He said that in his own household he goes through a very similar situation. His siblings often persecute them for being children of a concubine. Since his mother is deceased, there is no one to protect them. The princess seemed interested in that. Belle said that she must feel the same and could confide in him if she felt comfortable. But she does not want to depend on anyone, much less on someone like him. The boy does not know what her situation is, and assuming that he understands, something was disrespectful. Around the road, outside the walls, they are being watched. Night finally fell upon them. They reached their destination in one day as planned. But for the princess, it had been very exhausting. The gates open, and she is received. Only she does not know who this young man is. His name is Peter, one of the knights of that kingdom, and he said they are happy to finally welcome her. Belle had heard of Peter before, but could not recall at that moment, and he found it very strange that they were received outside the city. Those who had prepared the ambush were ready to act, and the princess's entourage remained outside. The boy noticed that there were many guards there, but it was still suspicious. A dagger was thrown at them. Belle knew that the princess would be an easy target outside the castle. He managed to react quickly and protect her with his divine armament. She and her guards were immediately startled. An enemy attack was underway and the princess was the target. Several daggers had been thrown at her. Since there were many, this could be a major problem. Peter was also prepared to act. With his sword skills, he managed to protect the princess. He would not let anything happen to her. Seeing what the knight was capable of, Belle assumed he must be at level B. The assassins needed to flee. The ambush had not been completed. Peter ordered his knights to pursue those men, while the princess would be escorted out of the castle. Belle remained outside while the princess was taken away. She looked back, quite apprehensive. Inside, they informed her that she was safe, but the princess stated that she was capable of defending herself. While the knight was saying that he would protect her, his throat was slit. The princess, who had not noticed the attack, was deeply frightened. The one responsible for that action was Peter himself. Now she knew that the real danger was right beside her. He looked at the guard who had just lost his life. His sacrifice had been completely in vain. The princess did not know what was going to happen now. Peter told her that her life would end in a few moments. Despite having said that she could defend herself, the princess was completely defenseless. The knight slowly approached her. She was so terrified that she could not summon her divine armament. Peter revealed himself to be a degenerate, wearing a horrifying smile. The princess now needed someone capable of saving her. The window of the room was shattered. Peter was surprised by what had just happened. One of his men had been eliminated, and the boy responsible for the escort was the one who did it. Of all the possible people to take action, it was not the boy that the princess had been expecting. He apologized for being late. The boy finally stepped down from the window. Looking at the princess, he informed her that from that point on, the job was his responsibility. Peter had assumed that, strategically, the guards would take the bait outside. He did not believe the boy would be capable of defeating him, and finally, the protagonist remembered who this person was. But Peter ended up very confused. His real name was Von Riegel. This fact left the knight extremely surprised. He had not imagined that the child knew that. If his divine armament consisted of 2 combinations with 3 thunder dice, so far he had managed to eliminate some counts, even bringing down a Marquis. Impressed by the child, he wanted to know how he had discovered all this. In his past life, he was the one responsible for bringing him justice, which is why he knew all these details. The boy had not imagined that he would go after the princess one day, but now he would not escape his fate. Even though he was just a child, Peter felt quite intimidated by him, but he still acknowledged that it was an interesting situation. Even if he had been investigated by the child, the boy would never be able to defeat a level B paladin, and indeed, it could be an insurmountable challenge for him. But if his opponent was Peter, he would not have any difficulty. Annoyed by the protagonist's audacity, he said he would make him regret those words. The boy already knew that Peter would start by throwing his weapons, and that was exactly what he did with his set of daggers. The boy dodged all of them without difficulty, because he already knew that his opponent would launch a surprise attack, executing a diagonal slash with his right hand. Peter was astonished that he had missed all his attacks. But the protagonist already knew he would try to surprise him from behind. His hand was already prepared to summon his divine armament, and with his sword, he managed to block the surprise attack. He already knew all those moves. Peter did not understand how that little piece of human filth could match his speed. Bell said he could finish him off at any moment, so if he valued his life, he had better surrender now. But his opponent was overcome with deep rage. Feeling underestimated, he warned that he would turn that brat into tiny pieces. With his anger, his attacks became even more predictable. That was his weakness. Guided by his fury, he delivered multiple strikes, but none of them were able to reach the child. The princess was impressed by his combat skills. Even though he was small, he was fighting an assassin as if it were something simple. He silenced all of his attacks. The princess realized that, in truth, she talked too much. The ring on one of her fingers began to glow, and the protagonist, now out of patience, announced that he would put an end to this once and for all. The first attack he struck against his opponent was effective. Peter had been wounded. He needed to rethink his attack strategy. He realized that all his movements were being read. Things were happening just as his boss had warned. That boy might be extremely talented, or there could be something else about him, so he should not be careless. Facing the difficulty, he decided to use his greatest trump card. The protagonist was aware of this. He would use his ability an impenetrable barrier of light, and he told him that this was no problem at all, as he would be able to overcome this challenge. Peter believed the boy was merely being arrogant, so he began to open that small vial. Even knowing what it might be, the protagonist grew worried. Those were the tears of the Dragon King. After throwing them to the ground, it seemed as if he had used some kind of stimulant. That was a rare item that multiplied the user's mana for a brief period of time. Peter said he would make the child regret not being cautious. He threw his daggers, but this time it was different. They were noticeably much more powerful, and the boy needed to be careful, because now he was surrounded by all those blades. They had stopped in the air, completely encircling him. Peter believed his victory would finally happen, because the boy had been imprisoned inside a barrier of light. He felt his body being lifted into the air through magnetism. The princess grew worried about her bodyguard. He had to use his shield to try to break free. Using the power of the shield, he attempted to obliterate the barrier. But the wind his weapon produced was not strong enough. Peter was not done demonstrating his abilities. His daggers began to glow even more with an electric radiance. Energy coursed through the entire barrier. Inside it, the boy writhed in agony. Peter said he would make this stage quick. Almost losing consciousness, the boy realized he could not end like that. While he was weakened, arrows began to fly across the room. They were aimed at the daggers. This caused the barrier to be completely destroyed. Only then did Peter realize what was happening. The princess had managed to use her divine armament. That paladin was risking his own life to save her. She could not remain afraid forever. Her intervention only made Peter even angrier. He lunged at his victim to finish the job. And now the princess was overtaken by fear. But the protagonist only needed that small amount of help. Finally, the assassin understood that he was in trouble. His body was struck by a deep and effective blow. It was enough to render him incapacitated. Bell had won that duel. His opponent's body collapsed to the ground, completely motionless. Once recovered, he asked if the princess was hurt. With a sad expression in her eyes, she said nothing to him. But she approached the boy. Touching his face, she told him that he was the only one injured in that room. Apologizing, she said that he had been involuntarily caught up in the succession conflict, but the boy assured her that this was no problem. In fact, the princess was as strong as she had claimed to be. To which she replied that she was not as strong as her bodyguard. Very grateful for his help, she told him that if he ever needed it, she would stand up for him. Kneeling, the boy expressed his gratitude for the princess's help. She looked at him with great admiration. Removing the ring from her finger, she wished for him to keep this small artifact. As a token of her gratitude and friendship, Belle knew exactly what that artifact was. That was no ordinary ring. Finally, the mission had been completed without casualties. He was received by the Duke. He listened to everything that had happened during the princess's escort. Belle stated that he had successfully completed the task, but the Duke noticed that there was something more to it. On one of the boy's fingers was the Ring of Solomon. It had been given to him by the princess as a sign of her trust in him. This was a valuable artifact, one of the royal family's treasures, a source of mana. It was unbelievable that the boy had obtained such an artifact. He might be even more impressive than the Duke had imagined. Realizing this, he could not hide his satisfaction. He informed the boy that he would enlist him in Athens immediately. He had not expected to receive this news. Because that was an elite academy for paladins, its access was exclusive to noble families. Most members of his family were educated by private tutors. Tradition dictated that only potential successors of the family attended the academy. This could only mean that he was now in the race to become the heir. The Duke ordered him to continue training until he was notified about the start of his classes. The boy still had something to say, and his father wanted to know what it was. Standing before him, he remained firm, because he had a request to make now. The doors opened. He was already outside the hall with his sister, who was very happy. She cannot believe that this is her new room. Her bed is now much more comfortable. It was the Duke himself who gave permission for this. He requested that they move into the main house, as this would contribute to earning the respect of others. The girl cannot hide how happy she is. She notices something different about the boy's hand. There was a small wound on it. He said that he got injured on his last task. Knowing this made her a little worried, but soon they went back to playing. That made him feel even better. Sarah would definitely be well taken care of from now on. Now he needs to focus on his future, because in 5 years, a catastrophe will happen. His sister could be in danger again, and he needs to gather information to find out who is responsible for it. And to do so, he must become the heir of his family. Jin's servant goes to his room to report something. He bows, waiting for permission. But Jin remains focused on his painting, staying deeply concentrated on it. the servant reported that the bastard brother would be sent to Athena Academy. He was the first since Jin himself. They should eliminate him immediately. But Jin had no interest in that. He put his painting aside for a moment. He stated that his brother posed no threat for now. His brother's growth would be advantageous as well, because there was something he truly enjoyed doing. His servant was surprised by that. Jin revealed himself to be a true degenerate, who enjoys crushing things after they have fully developed. Given that, it would be done as he wished. Even though his master had already given the order, he considered this a risky strategy. The boy had multiple divine weapons and had already managed to defeat a level B paladin. He needed to make his move immediately, purely out of precaution. Bell was outside training. He needed to develop his unique abilities, and it would be ideal to hone them before entering the academy. The problem was that, to do this, he would have to hunt countless monsters. Through the reflection of his sword, he saw that his brother's servant was approaching. He needed to stay alert to this approach. The man was getting closer to him, addressing him with formality, something he did not expect from someone supposedly hostile. Knowing he was his brother's servant, he asked what he wanted there. He was apologizing for what had happened the other day, because it was disrespectful to point his blade at one of the Duke's sons. The protagonist thought that perhaps he might be a good person, and considering that, he asked him not to worry about the past. He thanked the boy for his kindness. He said he had something else to discuss with him. The boy was still holding his sword, and the servant wanted to know if he would like to accompany him on a monster subjugation mission, an unusual task. He mentioned that his master Jin and the other paladins were planning something else. He was impressed with the boy's performance and wanted to help him. This was a very strange invitation. He could not refuse it since he was the Duke's son, but he recognized that he needed to be cautious. He said that he would accept the invitation, and the man thanked him deeply, because he planned to eliminate him during this task. The protagonist asked where they would be going. It was a remote place called Ika, and he knew exactly what kind of place that was. He had forgotten, but it was the perfect place to use a special method to increase his mana. Ambrosia was a rare item that permanently increased the user's mana. The carriage set off toward the location for the monster eradication. The protagonist was inside it, eager to eliminate some creatures while thinking how great it would be to get some ambrosia. But the chances of obtaining it were slim. To do so, he needed to enter a hidden dungeon, and he knew the location of one of these hidden dungeons, because it would appear near that city called Ithaca. Since it was already nighttime, they needed to find lodging. The man would pass along the necessary instructions. They needed to eradicate some leviathans. They had been informed that several of them were in that location. They were level C monsters. Since it was already late, they would start at dawn the next day and needed rest for that. The boy said he would go to his room. As he climbed the stairs, he was being watched. The man thought he was an idiot who did not know what was happening. He would make everything look like an unexpected accident. No matter how talented he was still at level C. It would be easy to take him out. Once in his room, he assumed that Razor must already be asleep. He summoned his shield, using his wind magic through the window that allowed the artifact to be used in an unexpected way, transforming into a platform capable of flying. The hidden dungeon was located within the monster forest. He and his master found it a long time ago, but no one knows its location. Finally, the boy's feet touch the ground. As his artifact disappears, he imagines that he has located the dungeon. Before him is a small entrance. The boy begins to explore its interior, coming across a massive portal. That was exactly what he was looking for. Hidden dungeons can be distinguished by their color. The blue ones are level A. A green gate is level B, and upon completion, he will receive ambrosia equivalent to the dungeon's level. That will definitely help him a lot. The boy is prepared to enter the gate. He needs to defeat the dungeon's boss creature. In his past life, he faced it while only at level D. His master had warned him that it was too early, and it might still be difficult for him now, but he cannot retreat just because of fear. He placed his hand inside the gate. Passing through it, he thought about how he needed to get stronger as quickly as possible. Inside the dungeon, he was already battling the first creature, but it did not seem challenging enough. He observed the movements of that phantom knight, which was prepared to advance and attack once more. It delivered swift and precise strikes, but the boy was able to keep defending himself, and in doing so he found an opening in the attack, striking the knight while it was completely unguarded. But his strike was not enough to defeat it. On the contrary, the force of the impact threw the boy backward. He needed to switch weapons, and now he wielded the mighty hammer. With it in his hands, he managed to land another blow, yet the creature remained unscathed. Physical attacks were not enough to destroy that armor. It was up to him to try another strategy. Using his sword once more, he made his blade shine. He was going to attack using magic. The strikes hit the armor. Even so, they failed to cause any damage. He had never seen a creature like that before, but he understood that he was still only at level C. Once again, he was pressured by the Phantom Knight's attacks. At a disadvantage, he needed to think of another strategy immediately. If a creature had a shield, it certainly must have a weakness. And the boy seemed to have figured something out. A mana-coated bullet should do the job. Now he was including Fire Spit. He began charging the attack that he would fire, and the Phantom Knight kept advancing in his direction. Only 2 seconds remained for it to be ready. The creature was getting closer and closer, until it was already in range to injure him. Finally, when the distance became short enough, his attack was fully charged. The shot was fired at the armor, proving to be truly effective. It was powerful enough to destroy the armor. The creature fell to the ground as it had been subdued. The boy also collapsed due to the recoil of the shot. With the battle over, he exhaled deeply in relief. A magical attack was the creature's weakness. It just needed to be strong enough. If he had not possessed a divine weapon like that, he would have been in serious trouble. The dungeon boss must be terrifying, but that was expected of a hidden dungeon. Even so, obtaining rare items from those monsters was a great opportunity. That potion could restore his stamina and mana. The boy drank it immediately, as he needed strength to continue. And that was exactly what he did, destroying every creature in his path, until he finally arrived where he wanted. Behind that enormous gate must be the strongest creature. He did not know if it would be a demon or a gigantic serpent, but he was about to find out. Finally, he entered the main hall. It resembled some sort of arena. The boy started hearing sounds. Before him, a shadow appeared, resembling a knight. His body started to shiver and his mouth became dry. The pressure was simply overwhelming, and the creature his eyes beheld was truly dangerous. Its eyes glowed with an intensely bright scarlet color. The knight slowly approached. It was certainly the dungeon's boss creature. He was preparing to face that terrifying monster. The boy needed to stay completely alert. The Phantom Knight looked at its sword, swiftly moving its weapon. Certainly, an attack was about to begin. In the blink of an eye, the boy needed to react or his fight would end much sooner than expected. The destruction that followed was utterly overwhelming. Bell managed to gain a bit of distance, but he still had to dodge the crushing blows. If he were hit by any of those attacks, it would be fatal. Once again, the creature turned toward him, forcing the boy to leap away. That was the opportunity he needed to summon his sword. Now he could attack as well. Finding an opening, he struck the Phantom Knight in the back, but its armor was much denser than he had expected. Once again, he would have difficulty breaking through that steel. The boy had no time to think. He needed to stay focused on his dodging. He decided to try the strategy that had proven effective earlier. Using his fire spitter, this was the best strategy he had. This time, he would charge the attack for much longer. A total of 5 seconds. He still needed a bit more time to charge the attack. And as soon as it was ready, he fired the Phantom Knight, hoping that it would be enough to win. The attack was heading toward the creature, impacting cleanly with no defense at all. To his total surprise, it had no effect whatsoever. He noticed a strange marking on the Phantom Knight's chest. That magic resistance was truly formidable. Once again, the boy found himself cornered. He was lucky that his agility was enough to keep dodging. Needing much more defense, he decided to use his shield as well. With it, he managed to block a direct attack. But that destructive power was far too dangerous. With trembling hands, he realized that something had happened. The Phantom Knight was changing its attack pattern. This time, it was coming from above, preparing to deliver a fatal blow. Bell needed to act as fast as he could. The Black Knight's sword struck the ground, completely shattering the arena floor. Amidst the rising dust, it completely lost sight of the boy. Finally, he revealed himself again, gaining even more distance. He did not have enough mana to pierce that armor, and soon he realized that the dust had obscured his enemy, until he saw a glow forming. His body could feel a bad omen. The creature's sword had been thrown at him. He had to use his shield's protection to avoid being finished. The blade ended up ricocheting far away, and the boy realized that the attacks had not stopped. That strike had only been a feint. The real threat was coming from behind. There was nothing he could do. His body writhed in agony from the brutal impact. It was lying on the ground before the creature, and it was still not satisfied with its enemy's life, trying to stomp him to end his suffering. Even though he was weakened, Bell managed to dodge once more. He only regained his strength because he had drunk an elixir. If not for that, he would have been defeated. The problem was that he had nothing left to rely on, and the creature had retrieved its sword. Faced with the risk and the impossibility of winning, he had to gamble. The shield was the heaviest weapon he had. That gave him an interesting plan. He imagined that he could throw it at the correct speed using wind magic. Finally, the shield had become an offensive weapon. It was now the most powerful projectile he possessed. His plans were thwarted. The Phantom Knight managed to dodge, something the boy had not expected, and this time he was completely unarmed. There was nothing left to stop that blade. Completely cornered, he realized he would not be able to dodge. And now there was no shield to protect him. He needed the trajectory to be corrected to have a chance at survival. Surprising the creature, the shield managed to hit it, buying him enough time to dodge the sword. Seizing the opportunity, the boy advanced. This time, he would change his type of attack. With the strength of his hammer, he hoped to cause some damage. The Phantom Knight knew it would not be able to dodge. The force of the impact proved devastating. After that, the creature fell to the ground defeated. Bell was panting after that fierce battle. His strategy with the shield had been very risky, but it had proven highly effective. Now he needed to stab whatever was inside that armor. But the boy had taken too long to do so. The knight was standing once again. That battle was not over. Unexpectedly, the armor plates began to fall, and the creature revealed its true form, something the boy had not yet understood. The monster was about to grab a latch present on the guard of its sword, pulling from it what appeared to be a new weapon. That was some sort of lock. Its sword had still been sheathed. It had finally been revealed. The boy had never imagined that such a thing existed, and now he had a new enemy to fight. The creature had gained a lot of speed. Bell was struggling to keep up with its attacks, being violently thrown against the wall. The pain that surged through his body was agonizing. Upon hitting the ground, he no longer had the strength to continue fighting, and the creature kept approaching him. His senses were almost fading away, and the dungeon boss was prepared to take his life. Even without strength, the boy tried to stand once more, because he knew that if he did nothing, his life would end right there. He could barely lift his head. A slash was coming toward him, but it ended up being avoided. He was using the gauntlet. The creature's luck had finally run out. The monster did not understand. Its victim seemed to have no strength left. Meanwhile, the boy also summoned his sword. For the first time in the battle, he managed to pressure his enemy, and now the real fight was about to begin. The two began exchanging numerous blows. Both were much faster now, and the battle extended throughout the entire arena. Without armor, the monster had actually become much stronger, but it was still not stronger than the protagonist when using the power of the gauntlet. He was confident that he would resolve this conflict now. The colored marking on the monster's body changed hue. It now glowed bright red. The protagonist's sword passed through the creature's mirage. He immediately realized that his sword had cut through nothing, forcing him to defend against an attack he had barely seen. That color change made the creature even faster, and because of that, the protagonist was once again pressured. But he had not been defeated yet, and he needed more power to win. The more power flowed through his body, the riskier the situation became. That surge of strength was truly intoxicating. A grotesque figure appeared in his mind. The gauntlet was cursed. To receive that power, he needed to offer up his own soul, and the protagonist was about to make that pact. That mysterious aura began to envelop him, making him lose control. He could not resist so much power. It was as if his very existence was fading away. The entity warned him that he truly needed power now. The reason for his suffering was his own lack of strength. That was why he had always been oppressed. And because he was weak, he had ended up losing his life. By now, he should be exhausted from being so weak. It was time for him to be the one who took what he desired through strength. Little by little, he was losing control over himself. The creature saw this as an opportunity to execute him. But his opponent had already transformed his own power, now standing on equal footing with the creature's strength. The shockwave resulting from their blades clashing was devastating. There was only one thing driving him now, his insatiable desire for destruction. He no longer wanted to win, he only desired to destroy. And the creature would be his first obstacle. And after that, he would destroy anything that stood in his way. Even on the verge of losing control, the boy remembered his sister. That gave him a spark of awareness. Belle was still fighting the powerful creature. He realized that he could not pay this price now, because there was a beloved sister waiting for him. His battles were not motivated by the desire to take lives. The true motivation behind his desire to grow stronger was the need to protect his sister. In this way, he managed to regain control over himself. It was time for that creature to yield the power it possessed. The power of Aegis was truly formidable. He managed to push the dungeon boss back with ease. The entity tried to tempt him. He only needed to ask, and it would give him its power, as long as he offered his soul as payment. Because of the internal conflict, the boy still hesitated. But he decided to attack nonetheless, and the creature advanced toward him as well. Both prepared powerful strikes, only to find themselves once again engaged in rapid combat. The creature attempted to surprise him with a mana attack, but its speed was once again surpassed. The boy managed to disarm the creature, forcing one of its arms to part from the rest of its body. That would make it impossible for the creature to continue fighting, and the protagonist finally found the opening he needed, slashing the creature in two. At last, it seemed that the monster had been completely subdued. The winner of that battle was Belle. Still feeling power flowing through his body, he observed the creature's form, which, having no more life, began to disintegrate. That challenge had reached its conclusion, and now he could rid himself of the cursed gauntlet. That enemy had been far too powerful, and the boy had almost lost control of himself. He needed to avoid using that gauntlet as much as possible. Before him, the small vial had appeared. It was the item he had been searching for, ambrosia. If he drank the contents of that vial, he would have as much mana as a level B paladin, allowing him to use his divine armament abilities. The truth was, he had never seen a vial of ambrosia before, and he was a bit concerned. But he knew that he needed to drink it if he wanted a better future. At first, he felt no change at all. After a while, he began to feel his mana increasing significantly. It was incredible. He had reached level B instantly. After the power came the pain, so intense that the boy almost felt incapable of resisting. His chest ached, and at the same time, he felt as if his body was burning. The sheath on his waist began to glow intensely. Not knowing what was happening, he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Now he was lying in the center of a magical formation, waking up still very startled. He had no idea what place this was. It was as if he had been teleported to another dimension. A man welcomed him to this place. He had finally woken up. That was his mentor, and it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Even with his face hidden under a hood, the boy recognized him. There was no doubt that this was his master. Other people were also present in that place. A girl carried a hammer, and a concealed man was the bearer of the gauntlet, as well as a knight who wielded a sword. In that place, he was warmly received by all of them. It was the first time in his life he had learned of something like this. That was the dimension of souls. Seeing his disciple again left the man very emotional. The boy was also happy about this reunion. His master's name was Regressed. It was he who had given him Avalon. He was the original bearer of the Achilles shield. Seeing his master so unexpectedly was truly gratifying. But he could not understand anything. He did not know how he remembered him since he had returned in time. The master said that he had been watching his pupil from that place. He had witnessed his death and reincarnation. Hearing this, the boy became intrigued about the nature of that place. That space existed within Avalon itself. It was where the divine armaments were stored, along with the souls of each of their successors. This statement left the boy perplexed. He wanted to know where his former master's body was. He replied that his body was probably somewhere in the mountains, enjoying retirement. Avalon was a divine armament that bonded with the souls of its bearers. By carrying it through time, its bearer lost connection with it. But his consciousness remained linked to his body. The boy immediately imagined that returning to the past had been the work of his armament. But the master doubted it. At the very least, he did not know that the armament was capable of such a thing. But the boy had not expected that even his master could not provide him with that answer. Reunited with him once again, his master told him that he had done an excellent job protecting his sister. He congratulated him for that, but the boy felt embarrassed upon receiving the praise, and he wanted to know why he was there with him. The master was about to begin his explanation, but one of the souls started moving. He said that the two of them were taking too long and that he also wanted to talk. His name was Reven, the wielder of the fire spitters. The master warned that he had not finished speaking with his disciple yet, and the man asked him to be a bit more flexible, saying that he was not a stone golem. Before them, the boy just watched, understanding absolutely nothing. Introducing himself to the sixth successor, he said it was a pleasure to meet him. The boy remained thoughtful for a moment, and when he tried to shake his hand, he realized that the man was playing a joke. That man was extremely easygoing, something the boy did not understand. Seeing his confusion, Reven found it quite amusing. He said that the sixth successor was indeed very naive. The girl also joined them. Charlotte noted that the newcomer was still adapting, but the man said it was just a harmless joke and asked if Haru agreed with him. But the man was extremely shy. Besides being the fourth successor, he asked them not to speak to him. The girl knew that Reven liked to tease others. He asked her not to get so irritated, saying it ruined her beauty and made her wrinkle. Charlotte did not appreciate that comment at all. The master tried to ask them to stop arguing, but she did not like Regis' stance. Before she could respond, she already had to deal with the comedian's antics. It was strange for the boy to see his master in that kind of situation so lighthearted. It only showed that his predecessors were indeed powerful. He had already asked his master about them. They were all great heroes who fought against evil. The man with the sword asked them to get straight to the point. The first successor, Adam, confirmed that there was a purpose for that meeting. They had summoned the boy to that dimension to warn him. Upon learning this, he asked what it was about. The sixth successor needed to learn how to use the abilities of his divine arms. This news took him by surprise. Divine arms, when fully mastered, radiated an enormous amount of mana. If he were to unlock them now, it could be fatal to his body. That's why he was feeling so much pain. He needs to wait for his body to mature to unlock this power. But the boy has urgent needs. He believes he cannot stop his progress now. He needs all this power to be able to protect his sister. Adam realized that the boy was unwavering, and there is only one thing to be done now. He decided that he would crush the boy right there. He didn't expect Adam to be so fast. He needs to defend himself from that attack immediately. Only then does he realize that Adam is already behind him. The boy was struck by the back of the sword. Adam hopes that with this he realizes he is still too immature, but he didn't take into account that his attack could have been blocked. Given this, he needed to rethink his plans. The boy's last fights had made him progress a lot. Perhaps he is capable then. He should first be able to master the sword. All the successors are waiting for this, and the boy wants to know if he has finally been accepted by him. Adam confirmed it. If he keeps only one ability, he might be able to control it, granting the boy permission to unlock the B-level abilities of the Caliburn sword. He will receive the other abilities when the time comes, as well as those of A-level, abilities that are truly extraordinary. The boy warned that he would unlock them immediately. Adam seemed to like the conviction of that little one, and the comedian wished that number 6 would have luck. They'd all hope that the protagonist will be able to protect his little sister, even the silent and reserved young man. They will continuously observe him from the shadows. It is time for the boy to return to his body. He woke up inside the dungeon. He doesn't feel pain in his body, but he has a strange sensation. Contemplating the power in the sword, he is eager to use it in subjugating the monsters. For he already knows the unique ability of that sword. To reach the place where the monsters are, they needed to take a boat, and now they are in the middle of the planned journey. The young man warned that the Leviathans would start appearing soon, so it is time to be prepared for battle. What he doesn't know is that everyone there is conspiring to attack him. Even the barber is involved in this plot. The boy started finding some things strange about that task. Why would a B-level knight be assigned to eliminate C-level creatures? Or why would he need help? It is certain that something must have been planned. The protagonist knows that being attacked by surprise would be a problem. That's why he must not take his eyes off him at any moment. He was informed that they were getting closer and closer. Yet the place in question remained very calm. Looking at the young man, he saw that he had drawn his knife. The protagonist held the oil firmly. Making a cut on his arm, he warned that he needed to attract the creatures first. He used his own blood as bait for this. That would be enough for the creatures to go into a frenzy. As he said, it didn't take long for the first creature to appear. Along with it, several others appeared as well, a much greater number than they were expecting. Since they are sea-level creatures, the protagonist suggested that they split up to take care of the boat, but he couldn't let the boy remain alone. Very suspicious, he asked what his reasons were for that. Finally revealing his malicious side, he declared that the boy could not leave there alive. He initiated combat against the protagonist, who had his leg tied by the whip. He quickly realized that he was already at a strategic disadvantage. The one who had tied him was one of the boatmen of that place. He then removed his hood to reveal his identity. The man continued to hold the whip firmly. That was Spencer, someone the protagonist knew very well. The other young man urged him to do immediately what they had planned. Using his strength, he lifted the protagonist off the ground. With one of his legs frozen, that would be nothing pleasant, for he was thrown into the sea. Spencer had not yet finished his attack, as he used his power to make the ice even larger. That way, it would be very difficult for the boy to return to the boat. Ignoring the basic laws of physics, the ice began to sink. They expect that with this, he will be consumed by the creatures. Now they can count on the boy having fallen in battle, leaving the monsters to ensure he doesn't escape. The boy needs to breathe immediately. To return to the surface, he thought of using his shield. It's capable of generating its own wind, so this wouldn't be impossible. Impossible is that the ice sank. He began using magic to produce some air. Using the interior of the shield, he managed to regain some of his breath. He didn't expect those two to join forces to betray him. He was alert around Razor, but didn't know there was another one there as well. A large part of the surface around the boat is also frozen, and that is not his only problem. There are many creatures there that could pose a deadly threat. The priority is to solve the problem with his leg. With the shield, he should be able to break all that ice. He finally managed to free himself, but his ankle had been injured. It must have happened when the whip came into contact with his skin. The creatures noticed that he was bleeding. Without wasting time, he summoned his sword. He does not have the numerical advantage, but this experience will be an excellent training opportunity. It is his first great challenge since Reincarnation, and now he will be able to use his newly acquired ability. His first target is one of the creatures. The sword is glowing intensely. A projected energy blast had been fired at the creature. Several other swords of light appeared in the water, eliminating all hostility. It had been a while since the last time he was able to use this. Summoning the Starblade formation, it is time for him to finally enjoy the hunt. Several creatures are heading toward him, but the swords of light are capable of intercepting their targets. They are heading straight for the creatures. This is the true ability of the Caliburn sword. It summons several luminous swords capable of flight as sharp as the original sword. Soon, all those creatures will be completely annihilated. On the surface, things are not easy either. They have to reduce those creatures to nothing, and they are using the frozen surface for support. It has been 5 minutes since everything happened. They are confident that the boy must have already departed from the land of the living. Spencer is impressed with Razor's cognitive ability. That plan was brilliant. Besides that, he can defeat all those creatures with ease. Razor confirmed that he is on a completely different level. It's good that the boy stays on his side, or he might perish like one of the creatures, but he believes he can still be useful. Without realizing it, the ice beneath his feet started to crack. The cracks grew, and he went to check what it could be, only to be suddenly attacked. The other young man was impressed by that. Something had happened underwater. A large hole had formed in the middle of the ice. That is definitely disastrous, because a gigantic creature appeared, ready to feast on them. A tentacle from the creature emerged from the water. He needs to be quick to avoid being caught by it. That creature is at B level, which requires several paladins of the same level to be subdued. If he is not cautious enough, he will end up losing his life. As if that were not enough, the creature has other tricks up its sleeve, firing several projectiles in his direction, but the knight managed to dodge them all. Now he needs to deal with the approaching tentacles. The young man is sure that if he is caught by them, he will also lose his life. The faster he solves the problem, the greater his chance of survival. His divine armament allows him to channel mana through his weapons, releasing that energy through his strikes. Since it functions simply, his energy discharges are extremely powerful. He is confident that he can subdue the creature with a single blow. But the creature is smarter than he imagined. The knight finally managed to deliver his most powerful attack, striking that dangerous monster directly. But that was not the result he was expecting, because the creature had blocked the attack using another monster's body. That only makes the situation even more complicated for him. Since his enemy is now completely enraged, his life is at very real risk. He had to return to the safety of the boat. With the ice completely destroyed, he has no foothold to get close to the creature. And now he needs to worry about the other monsters in the water, which are jumping onto the boat determined to annihilate all the humans. That ends up demanding all his attention, without realizing that a tentacle was approaching, striking his face brutally. The weapons he has were not designed to face multiple opponents. Besides that, he does not have the strategic advantage of the environment. He cannot simply leave the boat. He looks outside while the monsters gather. The more time passes, the riskier it is to stay in that place. But more impressive than the monsters is the sudden sight of the protagonist emerging from the water. The boy was supposed to have perished long ago, and yet he appeared, flying over his shield, defeating even more monsters. The protagonist saw that the deceiver was in an interesting situation. He only wanted to know how the boy had survived. Even after being deceived, he is willing to help them in that situation. But Razor does not believe that the boy is capable of helping him. That larger creature is a B-level monster. There is nothing he can do against it. But the boy has something to show. The closer he gets, the greater the number of tentacles. But the protagonist is not unprepared. He is still using Caliburn's abilities. The blades manage to intercept all the tentacles. Seeing everything, Razor cannot believe that he has perfected the unique ability of his weapon. Those abilities must be difficult to master. Bell warned that you would slice up that monster and turn it into fish food. The creature prepares to fire more shots, launching water blasts at the boy, who did not panic at any moment. That attack could end up destroying the boat completely. Bell is preparing to show the creature what he has in store for it, completely changing the formation of the light blades, merging them all into the original blade. All those swords had fused, creating a lightsaber, capable of firing a concentrated energy beam. The creature's attack collides with the boy's counterattack, but his determination to win is much greater. His attack was able to completely pierce through the monster's body. Moreover, he passed over it while the blades sliced through. Finally, the creature had been subdued. After that attack, it was completely out of combat, as its body had been split into two halves. It is impossible that the boy was capable of achieving such a feat. Returning to the boat, he confirmed that the next one would be Spencer, because he needs to pay for what he did earlier. Definitely, this boy will be a problem for Jin, or so his servant thought. And even after that display of strength, he is determined to eliminate the boy right there. He warned him that a bastard would never defeat a B-level paladin. As he approaches him, the boy finds it surprising that this paladin still believes in victory. Since he used Spencer for a surprise attack, he is sure that he deeply intimidates him. The two knights observe each other for a moment, until they decide to launch their attacks. The clash between their weapons finally happens. At first, it does not seem like the boy is being pressured, until Razor manages to make the difference in their physical strength more apparent, pushing the boy far away. Definitely, there is one among them whose physical strength is superior. He believes that this will be enough to determine the outcome of this battle. But the protagonist is already able to use the abilities of his sword, sending one of the light blades toward him. Knowing what they are capable of, he was immediately concerned. Being only one blade, it wouldn't be difficult to defend against the attack. It was all just a trap by the boy to surprise him in his blind spot. Razor is also able to use the abilities of his divine armament, completely destroying the light blade. Little by little, its image fades away. He believes that the boy will never be able to land a strike on his body. So far, the duel between them seems quite balanced, but will not be easy to defeat a B-level paladin. Its mana is being drained very quickly because of the abilities. Because of this, all he has left is that last sword. Being a more experienced knight, he realized that the boy cannot keep using that ability, as it has a cost. Ruthlessly advancing toward him, he wants to end the fight. His attack did not hit the boy the way he intended, but the second strike in the combination hit him directly. His still fragile and undeveloped body is not capable of withstanding that impact. The difference in physical strength between them is proving to be a huge advantage. He could use Aegis to end this, but he fears being trapped in the darkness. Since close combat is dangerous, he switched weapons, firing several shots at his opponent, who managed to dodge all of them. That was the chance the boy wanted to surprise him with an attack. Noticing the boy's strategy, he realized that it lacked the agility to be effective. He just hadn't accounted for the unexpected to happen. Using the momentum from the shots, he got even closer, making his strike reach its target even faster. He almost cut off his enemy's head, but only ended up angering him even more. Seeing his opponent becoming more enraged, he realized that his strategy was working very well, because he was caught off guard by the last light blade which pierced through his back. That was something he did not expect. With a wound of that magnitude, he will not be able to continue fighting. Realizing that his understanding of the boy's strategy was completely wrong. Knowing that his opponent cannot fight anymore, he approached him calmly. He warned him that it was finally over, and strongly recommended that he give up the idea of trying to attack him. The concept of giving up does not apply to him, because he believes the boy is a threat to the future of his master Jin. That is why the boy must be defeated here and now. Faced with this stance, he wants to know why he is so loyal to his brother. That was when he searched deep memories in his mind. In a battle, he had already been brutally weakened. There was no strength left in his body to keep walking. That was as far as he could go. A man was approaching him, stopping in front of his completely obliterated body. He imagined that the man on the ground must be the mercenary responsible for all those crimes. With what little strength he had left, he tried to look at this person. The young man was opening a small flask, pouring its contents over the badly injured man. He said that this was his lucky day because from that moment on, he would be his master. That is the reason why he is so loyal. He had been accepted by Jin, and he needs to repay all that kindness, no matter what happens to his life, completely destroying the light blade summoned by the boy. What remained of it was thrown to the ground. Bell realized that his enemy had already decided his fate. He thought he was just a bandit but respected his word as a knight. Now they will fight with full power. The young man still remains very angry. He is prepared to continue the duel, but Bell had seen that ability once before. It's very powerful, but it takes time to be ready. That is why he will attack first. The boy had already taken the offensive. As soon as he approached, he was surprised by a movement, being struck by his opponent's knee, realizing that he had been tricked by a feint. And now he is at risk of being defeated. Regaining himself, he warned that this is not the end, because he had reserved his last chance. A small fragment of the sword had still endured, slashing his opponent's back from one end to the other. That last strike left him incapacitated. He had believed he had destroyed all the swords. It is a shame that he was mistaken about that. The boy had only made it seem like they had been destroyed, and with that, he managed to build his strategy for victory. It was as if the boy had more battle experience than him, something difficult to explain. That was challenging. If he had not had a trump card, he would have surely lost. But he was able to defeat Razor, a B-level paladin. That is proof that he had grown stronger as planned. The ship continues its journey to the continent, finally arriving at the city. Sarah is looking for her beloved brother, but she still has not found him. She keeps searching around the castle. The boy does not seem to be anywhere. Even so, she continues without stopping, until she contemplates the possibility that he has not yet returned. The problem is that the task he went to complete should have already been finished. She noticed the doors that were open. That was the library. It was possible that her brother was inside, and the girl went there with the intention of finding him, but she ended up encountering someone else. Jin stopped his steps in front of her, leaving the girl a little surprised. Even though they were siblings, his presence was threatening. She is terrified of that situation but needs to greet him. When she tried to do so, she could not find the words, while being watched by a menacing gaze, capable of paralyzing her with fear. Passing by her, Jin said she was worthless. Hesitant, she took a few steps back, until she bumped into something, which made her look behind her. It was her brother who had found her, and he asked Jin what he wanted with Sarah, but he still did not respond at all. The girl was finally able to rejoice in finding her brother. It was very good to know that he had returned safely. Even so, he had been injured once again. He said he had ended up encountering a strong monster this time, a B-level paladin named Razor. Even after hearing that, Jin showed no reaction at all. Bell warned that the young man had failed in his trap. Jin simply said that no one cared about that, because they were just small pebbles in his path. And the same goes for that foolish girl they called his sister. Now he would continue on his way as he had no time to waste with pebbles. There was still something the protagonist wanted to say. He warned his brother that he would be the one to succeed the Duke because Jin was incapable of protecting this family. He immediately turned around after hearing that, looking at the boy in a menacing way, revealing his intense and hostile presence. They were engulfed by his aura, which was truly something impressive. But that was not enough to make Bell hesitate in any way. Jin showed a faint smile. Finding that interesting, he began to laugh even louder. It might be interesting to look at the pebbles from time to time. Leaving the library, he warned that his brother could try to finish him off whenever he wished. Sarah was very worried about that conversation, but she was quickly reassured by the protagonist, who knew that was frightening. That pressure was surreal. Her brother was truly extraordinary. In terms of strength, there was a huge difference between them. To be able to defeat him, Bell needs to reach A level before graduating from the academy. After that incident, a few days had passed. He had his bags packed, ready to depart. The Duke was already waiting for him. Noticing that the boy was also fully prepared, he thanked his father for the support he had received. The academy requires students to be accompanied by bodyguards. The Duke would send a B-level paladin with him. He said that he would be at the boy's service. Faced with this, Bell wanted to ask something of the Duke, who allowed the boy to speak his mind. But before he could ask, he was surprised, because his sister had appeared, also packed and ready to go. She apologized for being late, carrying her suitcase over to the boy. His request was that his sister be allowed to accompany him on this journey. The Duke also wanted to know the boy's motivation. He didn't want to leave her alone and wanted them to stay together. But he could not allow that. The academy only permitted bodyguards, and he was not going there to play. Sarah tried to ask her father to reconsider, but he warned the girl not to make that request again. So to solve the problem, he asked that she be his bodyguard, because when he is by her side, he is certain that he can accomplish anything, even defeating an A-level paladin. The Duke was thoughtful for a brief moment and found the boy's statement amusing, saying that he could do as he pleased. The carriage departed, heading toward the academy. Sarah was quite impressed with all the different sights. The two had finally arrived at their destination. That building was truly magnificent. The girl was happy for her brother's achievement. That was a school exclusively for nobles. While he was in class, he asked his sister to study in their room. Now they needed to get settled immediately, but they came across several students fighting. It was a friendly match between students, a good opportunity to observe and learn. Sarah was impressed. They all seemed very strong, but the protagonist noticed that they still appeared to be at D level. One boy among them stood out significantly, being immediately noticed by the protagonist. But he was only at C level, he would not be able to surpass the protagonist. Only 2 students remained in the battle, and the boy believed that this was his day to claim victory. Charging at his opponent, determined to finally defeat him, but the young man was not intimidated. He allowed the attack to come dangerously close. Even Sarah was worried for him. His response was even more surprising because he had caught his enemy off guard. All it took was a single strike. It didn't even seem like he used a divine weapon. He was definitely at B level, maybe even stronger than the protagonist. Even the other students were impressed with the outcome. The representative of Rothwindsor was incredible. That surname left the protagonist deeply alarmed, because he knew they were a rival family, their historical arch-enemies, and because of that, he was their enemy and his sisters as well. The admission ceremony at the academy was about to begin. They were congratulating the students who had been admitted to their first year. This was being done by the student council president, and he hoped that all these freshmen would at least be extremely strong individuals. Albert was currently a third-year student, and his family had already produced many renowned paladins. They had never met in his past life, but he knew that at 18, Albert had already reached S level. He immediately began to wonder if he had been involved in that incident. It was possible that he was one of those responsible. People were commenting that the boy was very intimidating and was already at B level. It seemed that more students in the student council were at the same level. The council was formed by those who had ranked in the top 4 positions at the martial arts event, and the title of president was granted to the event's champion. Albert was undoubtedly very powerful, but the protagonist was not sure if this person was his tormentor. To prevent such an attack in the future, he needed to show his enemies how strong he could be. The academy did not have elections for the council. Students were selected based on martial abilities, and the protagonist wished to participate as well, so that he could defeat Albert in combat. Inside the classroom, he waited for the professor to arrive. Someone was approaching to sit beside him. He asked if someone was already sitting in that chair. Bell said that no one was and that he could sit there. That boy's name was Lime Flexiel, and he hoped they could have enjoyable years at the academy. But there was something that caught his attention. That boy's surname was not unfamiliar. Seeing the protagonist's reaction, he became a little curious. He said it was nothing, but he was quite surprised. A few years into the future, he would eradicate some nobles as part of a personal revenge, earning the title of the Knight of Retribution. Even though today he was only a fraction of what he would become, Lime asked the protagonist's name. He was about to answer, remembering that his father had advised him not to reveal which house he belonged to. Many people might help him just because of his surname, which would prevent him from achieving his purpose at the academy. He needed to prove his worth through his own effort. The name the protagonist invented was Libel Slayer. He would continue hiding his identity until he defeated Albert. Hearing that surname, Lime assumed he also belonged to the commoner class. The insignia on their uniforms showed which class they belonged to. Commoners wore a circle, while nobles used a star. Bell confirmed that he was also a commoner, while Lime belonged to a barony of commoners. In that school, many came from noble families. Commoners were the minority. Knowing that they were of the same class, he hoped they could get along. It was interesting for the protagonist to befriend a promising knight. Lime could become a great ally. In his past life, he had never made friends, so this was actually a bit pleasant. A boy was approaching them as he already knew Lime. It seemed like he had come there just to bother him. This was Roger. He hadn't expected to be in the same class as his friend from his hometown. Everyone knew he was the son of a count and was already at D level. He wanted to know why that little boy was there too. He had taken the admission exam just like everyone else. Roger ended up congratulating him for that, but Lime seemed quite uncomfortable. Getting closer, he warned that Athena was not a place for him as he was just a commoner, so it would be better if he left soon. The boy became quite uneasy, and Roger warned that slaves should obey their masters, and that he could crush someone of his status with just his words. Bell intervened, stating that that was enough. Lime started to feel anxious for the new friend he had made. Roger also wanted to know who this boy was, immediately noticing that he was also a commoner, looking at him with all the disdain he had. Bell told the boy to leave, regardless of whether he was a commoner or not. Roger decided he would just let him go, making a sudden movement toward the boy. He had delivered a kick to Lime. Bell ended up worrying about his new friend. Roger was enjoying the situation. Bell said that he was just a bastard who shouldn't even consider himself a paladin. Since he belonged to the nobility, he should care about the commoners. But he said that the poor only existed to be exploited by the nobles. Bell warned that his understanding was very limited. A county could fall just as quickly as a commoner. Roger seemed like he was about to use magic, asking if the boy wanted to fight him. Now he had his divine weapon in his hands. Seeing that conflict was inevitable, he asked Lime to step back. He was about to summon his divine armament as well. Roger was quite intrigued by that, while the protagonist warned that he would force some common sense into his head. Seeing that sheath, he began to despise him even more. He must be nothing more than a nobody for having such a useless divine weapon, one that couldn't even crush a fly. And the protagonist warned that if that were the case, then Roger must be less than a fly. He didn't like being looked down upon by commoners and decided that he would finish him off. The protagonist was eager to see if he was capable of doing that. The entire class became interested in the fight. Roger charged at him, unaware that he was nothing more than a side character. The protagonist was prepared for combat, watching his opponent's scythe very closely. But a mysterious hand had appeared, positioning itself between the two. The liar of that woman was able to prevent the conflict. The sound it produced disturbed them both. Then she said they shouldn't fight since they were in the same class, and asked them to pay attention to her words. Belle didn't know who this girl was, but she continued playing her lyre. Introducing herself, she said her name was Silpha. She came from the Elpage family, a house of Marquesses, a higher noble rank than Roger's. The teacher entered the classroom, asking the students to take their seats because the lesson was about to begin. For the first task, she would evaluate her students' abilities. They had to use their divine armaments to attack the target as if it were a monster. They had to aim at those golems and show their true power. The first student demonstrated his abilities, charging at the target while wielding a sword, delivering the first strike. But the target was too hard. He was unable to do anything, only a very superficial cut. Immediately, the structure regenerated itself, something that the protagonist noticed. Several students also tried to attack it. The teacher observed that most students were still at E level, as most of them could barely produce elemental damage. Now it was Lime's turn to demonstrate his abilities. That spear had no magical power. You must have been the only one at F level in that evaluation. The boy charged at the target, driving the tips of his spear into its body. And like some others, he was thrown backward. Roger said he was just a useless boy incapable of using magic. The boy started getting up. Roger was about to show the difference between himself and the trash. His divine armament glowed like fire. He attacked with great confidence, and the blade of his scythe embedded itself in the target, leaving behind significant destruction. Some of his classmates were impressed. The teacher was pleased with his performance as he was at D level. Roger assumed he must be the best student in that class. Now it was the blonde girl's turn. It was finally her time to perform. She started playing her lyre and her attack was in motion. Her classmates were disturbed by the sound, and the sound waves were also destructive, causing even greater destruction to the target. Those two were on a completely different level compared to the rest. Roger was very polite to her and only respected her because she was a higher-ranking noble than him. He only did that to maintain a good impression with the nobility, but she said she would prefer if he didn't try that. She had already been thinking about it. At the academy, they were all equals. Noble titles were irrelevant in that space. Roger was upset about being ignored. The next one to take the exam was the protagonist, and the arrogant boy believed that the commoner would be a failure, since he wouldn't be able to do anything with just a sheath. Bell apologized, saying he wouldn't use his sheath as a weapon, wielding Caliburn to perform his attack. Roger was shocked that boy had more than one divine armament. The blonde girl was also surprised, as was his new friend. After his initial surprise, Roger noticed that the weapon had no magic, and after striking the target, he would be repelled backward. The protagonist only wished for him to pay attention. He was about to execute his attack, With a great barrage of strikes, he completely destroyed the target. All that remained were just pieces. His classmates were left speechless by that display of strength. Even the teacher was impressed. The golem had been cut apart without the aid of magic. What with the boy's skill, he didn't even need to resort to that. Roger could not accept that a commoner could be so talented. Lime went to his new friend to congratulate him on what he had done. He said it was simple. Even Lime would be able to do it. The boy was very impressed. He still couldn't master magic. Bell assured him that his judgment of the boy was correct. His divine armament had great potential. As long as he didn't give up, he could become the most powerful holy knight. Lime was very embarrassed by those encouraging words, until the blonde girl appeared between them. She wanted to know how that boy was so talented, but her closeness made the protagonist uncomfortable. Several other students were also interested. Some hadn't even been able to see his strikes. One of them said that his sword must be the most powerful divine artifact among the freshmen. Roger heard those words, and out of fear, the boy quickly corrected himself, saying that Roger's weapon was stronger. That only made him even more furious. The tasks for that day had ended. The next lesson would be a practical test. They would be hunting monsters in the forest behind the school, and everyone had to be prepared. The students still wanted to know more about that talented boy. Roger called his bodyguard, who appeared immediately. He had a worn-out expression and looked very unwell. Roger had brought a familiar for protection and would need it for tomorrow's task. The knight asked if he wanted to use it during the task. The boy said there was no problem with that, and his knight stated that the young master's actions were always courageous. Roger wanted to see the expressions of terror from both the commoners and the lower nobles, because he is going to send that proud commoner straight to hell. Outside the academy, they were preparing for class. The monsters there started at F level, and some E level monsters had also been released. Their task was to hunt these creatures. Whoever defeated the most of them would receive extra points. Roger couldn't hide that he was a malicious boy. Finally, the practice had begun. It was time for them to show what they were capable of. The girl wanted to compete with the protagonist to see who could get first place. Little did she know that first place already had an owner. He needed to show his strength to all of them. Lime wanted to accompany him, since he still didn't have the confidence to fight alone yet. He allowed him to come along, but made it clear that he wouldn't go easy. Running toward the forest, he told him to follow. It didn't take long before they encountered several creatures, but they were not a real challenge for the protagonist, who was cutting down those monsters as if they were pieces of paper. His classmates were also very engaged. He had already defeated 15 monsters. It was so easy that it didn't even count as a warm-up. Lime was quite impressed with his classmates' performance, but they had no time for conversation. One of the creatures had appeared behind the boy, but he was saved by the protagonist. He needed to stay very alert, as the number of creatures was greater than expected. Lime needed to fight against his own fears. His classmates were progressing normally, and the creatures were being defeated. He knew he needed to put in much more effort than that. Hidden in the forest, Roger continued watching his rivals. Filled with envy, he believed those commoners were arrogant. That was why he was going to make them pay. Soon, they would meet the end of their lives. Wielding a staff, he was about to summon something. The protagonist took note of the appearance of that magic circle, immediately becoming intrigued, because from within it, a creature was emerging, a monstrous being capable of controlling fire. That was a dangerous salamander. Its mouth was enormous and its teeth extremely lethal. All the students were worried about that appearance. While they ran away, the protagonist remained still. Lime couldn't believe that such a creature had appeared, and it was already prepared to attack anyone, leaving the boy completely terrified. For the second time, he had to be saved by the protagonist, who managed to block the flames using his shield. He ordered the boy to run away with the others. A B-level creature was not supposed to have appeared in the forest, but that was irrelevant. It was going to be a lot of fun. The protagonist was already using his abilities, sending his swords of light against the creature. They managed to cut through its tough scales. Roger had not expected that the commoner would be capable of using unique abilities. He needed to increase the difficulty, and called for his knight once again, who was ready to obey all his orders. The creature was surrounded by the swords of light. Line found that incredible. His classmate was pressuring a powerful creature. It was time for it to disappear. The swords of light were prepared to deliver a fatal blow, but the knight would not allow that to happen, sabotaging the boy's attack, and he quickly realized what had happened. There was another person in the forest who started approaching them, stating that that unique ability was indeed impressive. Presuming that he was the master of that creature, he asked what he wanted. The knight stated that he would not leave without the boy's head. The salamander resumed throwing fireballs, while the knight also attacked. The attacks collided and struck each other, raising a huge cloud of steam. To disperse it, he used the wind from his shield, but the knight had already prepared in advance, using a water prison to isolate each of those blades. They seemed to be incapacitated. That water prison had sealed his abilities. That was definitely a B-level paladin. The protagonist found himself surrounded by challenging opponents. Both the salamander and the knight continued attacking. Now he had to deal with both, blocking one's strike with his shield and cutting the other with his sword. With his current power level, this was beyond his capabilities. Lime didn't know what he should do. At this rate, his friend would end up being defeated. He saw Roger in the middle of the forest. His presence was definitely suspicious. That was his family's staff used for summoning. He immediately approached Roger, who hadn't expected the boy to find him. He asked if that familiar belonged to him. He should stop this now because the protagonist was in danger. Roger attacked him without a second thought, telling the weakling to stay on the ground. It was pathetic that he was unable to do anything to help anyone. He began to remember when he was still training as a child. It was pathetic that he couldn't use magic, and he had been humiliated countless times by that boy. But things couldn't continue that way. So he stood up, because he remembered the protagonist's words to him. That was the first time someone had spoken such encouraging words to him. He would not let his friend die because he had decided to save him. Roger couldn't believe that weakling actually thought he could defeat him, because worms were just worms. Lime told him to shut up, and that he shouldn't measure his worth without his permission. Roger started feeling a little uneasy. He warned that he wouldn't lose just because the boy could use magic now. Lime agreed with that statement. The idiot's scythe also started glowing. He needed to finish off the trash now, but Lime exuded great confidence. His spear was able to freeze those flames, making them disappear completely. A completely unexpected result. The real trash here had red hair. Roger was getting more and more enraged, charging furiously at his classmate, but Lime's spear was much stronger, capable of blocking that attack. Their weapons clashed and became locked together. Roger couldn't believe what was happening, and Lime knew exactly what he was doing. With ease, he destroyed the boy's divine armament, causing him to fall to his knees. He was unable to accept what had happened. It was impossible that he had been defeated by an F-level paladin. It was strange that Lime had ever feared that pathetic boy, because now he felt absolutely nothing. He ordered him to hand over the summoning staff. Roger asked if he knew what he was doing. He came from a great county and could destroy the boy's entire family, but it seemed he still hadn't understood the reality of the situation. Lime tried to reason with the boy while freezing his legs, commanding him once more to hand over the staff. With his pride completely obliterated, he agreed to give up the item, begging only to be spared, promising not to do anything cruel again. He had been completely defeated and humiliated. The staff had now changed hands. Lime warned Roger to stay away from him and his friend, or things could get complicated. He finally relaxed a little, while Roger was thinking of ways to act. The chain of his weapon was still within reach, and suddenly the other end of it began to glow. A sneak attack was in progress. Roger believed he would take down that boy, but Lime was completely aware of it, blocking that pathetic attack. It was truly pathetic that he had decided to act that way. The summoning staff lay on the ground, completely destroyed by the boy, leaving Roger speechless. He couldn't believe that the item had been destroyed. Little by little, the salamander began to disappear, a very unexpected result for that night. Immediately realizing that something had happened to his master, from afar he could see that he had been subdued, so he turned his attention to the other commoner. But he couldn't act so easily, because he didn't have time to be distracted. The true mastermind behind those actions had been discovered. It seemed like he had wanted to take down the protagonist. It was a shame it had to be this way. In a fair fight, that knight would never be able to defeat him. All he could do was curse the boy, firing several times at him, missing every shot. His situation had just become even more complicated. Even though that knight was B-level, he was at the bottom of the ranking. The protagonist struck his head with the hilt of his sword. The gap between their abilities was far too great. Bell warned that he would hand him over to the teacher, so he had to use his last resort. Prostrating himself immediately, he begged for mercy. It was so sudden that the protagonist was caught off guard. The knight claimed he was just following his master's orders. Disobeying a noble was truly not an easy task. That was exactly what the knight wanted, to catch the boy off guard. Finally receiving forgiveness for his actions, he thanked him, but in truth he planned to betray him. Only then did the boy warn that he was just playing with him, preparing his sword to strike him. He had already suspected he would be deceived. Lime went over to his friend, wanting to know if he was hurt. The protagonist knew that it was Lime's help that had prevented the worst from happening. The boy was only returning the favor. That handshake sealed their friendship. Other students arrived as well, thanking them for their help. It was impressive that he had defeated a B-level knight, but that wasn't the only thing that had happened. That knight was one of Roger's allies. The fire salamander was directly linked to them. He was definitely a despicable person, and because of what he had done, Lime was now being praised by his classmates. It seemed that in the end he really was very strong. Humbly, Lime thanked them for their compliments. As expected from the knight he would become one day. Someone had been watching everything from afar. The blonde girl seemed to have liked what she saw, understanding how that boy's divine armament worked. The task had finally been completed, and Roger would be punished for his actions. The girl was waiting for them at the end of the corridor. She had something to say to the protagonist. Looking at her, he remembered that her name was Sylpha. He asked what she wanted. She already knew that it was Avalon, the name of his divine armament. That immediately surprised him. She also knew that it was the sacred weapon of the heroes of the past. He had no idea how that girl knew about Avalon. From the protagonist's facial expression, she was completely right. She was the first person to recognize the nature of that divine armament. Her objective was very simple, and the protagonist seemed concerned. She clasped her hands together in front of him. Bowing, she very politely asked if she could see that weapon. The boy had not expected that. She had always admired that armament, the weapon of heroes, so she wanted to see it. Since it was a simple request, he showed her the sheath. She was quite impressed. She hadn't imagined it was something real. The protagonist wanted to know how she knew about this item. She said there was a legend in her mother's family about a hero who had a sheath containing multiple weapons. It was possible that one of his predecessors was from her family. Lime still didn't understand the whole story, but knew that his friend's divine armament must be incredible. The girl was very grateful, as one of her dreams had come true. As a token of appreciation, she said the two of them could go out together one day. There was a great cafe in town. They should all go there sometime. Lime really liked that idea, and the protagonist thought it would be interesting to explore the city. He agreed, but said he would bring someone with him. The young group was now inside the cafe. Sarah loved the taste of that strawberry pie. Belle was very happy that his sister was enjoying it too. The girl hadn't expected the protagonist to have such a beautiful sister. Sarah became a little shy at the compliment. Seeing her have fun was even more enjoyable for the protagonist. He was also having a great time. He had never had experiences like this in his past life. The blonde girl asked for everyone's attention. She was going to play a song for them all. It would be interesting to hear music played by a divine weapon. The girl started playing her lyre, but the sound was simply awful. Her musical proficiency was terrible. The girl knew she played very badly. She did it just to entertain her friends. Others also found it very amusing, asking her to continue playing. Pointing at Lime, she said he should sing as well. The two of them were entertaining everyone inside the cafe. It ended up turning into a really fun performance. Those two were his first real friends in his entire life. Outside, they were commenting on how much fun it had been. The girl wanted to take Sarah to buy some clothes. He wouldn't let his sister go alone, but his friend said this was a girl's thing. The protagonist was quite disappointed. He only asked to be informed if anything happened, and the girl realized that he was an excellent brother. Sarah wanted to know if she had any siblings. A little saddened, she said she had none. It seemed that someone was looking for Silpha. That person's name was Evelyn. He was one of the student council members. It was an unusual introduction for half-siblings. She should have been more polite, but she didn't see him as a brother. It had come to make her train. Because if her divine weapon were perfected, one day it would be useful to him. The girl had already told him she had no interest in participating in wars. Rolling up his sleeves, he said it was very inconvenient that she had that mindset. It seemed that he was going to have to drag her by force. A little blood started to seep from his palm, until the liquid began to gush intensely. Sarah was very frightened by that scene, and the boy was controlling it as he pleased. A divine weapon that used blood, she called for Mary, her bodyguard. But the boy had already taken control of the situation. Looking back, she realized her bodyguard had been defeated. That made the situation even more problematic. Her brother said they needed to leave now, and she told Sarah to run away because things could get dangerous. She needed to play her weapon to defend herself, but she wasn't able to handle that attack. The young man realized that if she asked for help, things would get complicated, so he needed to resolve it immediately. Sarah is about to be attacked, but she ended up being saved by her brother's friend. Silpha fell to the ground very weakened. It was foolish of her to do that, but now she won't be able to resist him. He used his ability to capture her, lifting her body off the ground. Sarah is still quite terrified, and the blonde girl had lost consciousness. The cause of this was her own brother. Desperate, Sarah asked for the protagonist's help. He quickly approached the place, cutting off that boy's tentacles. Who didn't expect this kind of intervention? The blonde girl had been rescued. Witnessing that made Sarah very relieved. The protagonist wants to know what this guy wants with his friend. The pleasant moment they were having had been destroyed. That mysterious guy asked if the protagonist is one of his sister's friends. Not that it was important, but it's better if he doesn't meddle in family matters. The protagonist asked Line to take care of the girls because he has a face to smash now, and he was going to deal with him immediately. But the guy is surprised by that stance. He warned that there's no merit in defending that girl. Using his sword to cut those attacks is very easy, which left the guy quite impressed. Helping a friend is something completely natural. Striking an attack against him, the guy protected himself with a shield, warning that this was a waste of time. That blood shield is really impressive. It looks like his sword won't work against it. He can't waste his mana in this fight. The guy was already prepared to attack, but the protagonist managed to dodge it. Recognizing that the protagonist is very irritating, he warned that he would finish everything quickly, firing several attacks at him. A very predictable attack. Then the boy wielded the fire spitter. Seeing that the boy possessed more than one divine weapon, he realized that he was not an ordinary opponent. It was the protagonist's turn to fire now, managing to stop all the attacks coming his way. It looks like they are at a stalemate. Seeing that he intercepted his attacks only made that fight even more complicated. But he is determined to capture his sister, producing a spear made of blood. That move will be the last. The protagonist confirmed that it really would be. The two attacked each other with everything they had. Some people on the rooftop said this was quite interesting. Looking up, they noticed the arrival of these people. One of them, upon landing on the ground, shattered the sidewalk stones. He had landed between the two, demonstrating his strength. He would like to join that fight as well. The protagonist knows he belongs to the student council, while the blue-haired guy wants to know what Zeal is doing there. He warned that he was being too hard on the kids. The girl said that this behavior is quite embarrassing, because he is a great weakling. Seeing his two colleagues, he decided to stop his attacks. But Zeal would have liked the fight to last a little longer. Making his whole body glow, he said it was best they went all out. His entire body was covered in armor. Besides being large, he has a powerful presence. The girl asked the muscular one to do his job, while she summoned several chains. That was necessary to prevent him from taking drastic actions. They weren't there to continue a fight. Seeing that magical power, the protagonist realized that she is also very strong. Zeal managed to break the chains without much effort. He said that Evelyn has responsibilities along with the student council in the company of Albert. Because of this, he will spend a month on an expedition inside the forest. The task begins immediately. He realized he had no other choice. Leaving there, he warned that he would take his sister in a month. The girl waved goodbye to the weakling newbie. It's a relief that they all left. The student council students are all monsters. Looking back, he checked to see if his friends were okay. She said she wasn't hurt and apologized for getting him involved in that. But the protagonist said it wasn't necessary. He just wants to know why she and her brother are fighting. The reason for this is that he wants to use her, as he is the next heir. When he graduates, he will try to expand his own territory by attacking unexplored regions. Lime knows those lands are filled with powerful creatures. Her brother believes that her divine weapon will be a powerful artifact in the war, but she doesn't want to fight. Her intention is to become stronger and become the heir. It's the same situation the protagonist is in. The problem is that she couldn't do anything. She's far from being able to defeat him. Sarah said that's not true because that girl was able to protect her. It looks like that gave her a spark of hope. Sarah is very grateful for what happened. Even the protagonist wants to express his gratitude, and he went to the girl to do so. Being able to save someone is what makes him strong. In the past, he couldn't. He said she should have confidence because if she lacks strength, she can train. Lime said she would help her too. At first, she doesn't even know what to say, but she is very grateful for her new friends. The protagonist knows that the last attack could have been fatal. In a month, he will return, so Bell needs to become stronger. For that, he needs to unlock his unique ability. He needs to talk to the comedian. He needs the permission of the predecessors to acquire new abilities, and he must return to that space. Closing his eyes, he began to concentrate, channeling his mana through the sheath. He was received by all the other predecessors. It has been a while since they last saw each other. The boy has a request to make, but they already know what it is, because they saw everything that happened in the last battle. That artifact was a bit problematic. That guy can shape things freely. It resembles Avalon itself quite a lot. It fell into a brief silence. The comedian warned that if he burns that blood, everything will be resolved. And the boy thinks exactly the same way, which is why he wants his unique ability. Something the comedian agreed to do without hesitation, just to show that it had been a joke. He really enjoys being a comedian. Charlotte said he should stop with that kind of nonsense. But it's much stronger than him. Being funny is cool, and that ability consumes a lot of magical power. If he used it now, he would soon be completely drained. But he has a condition for it. Before the rematch, he must fire 300 shots per day. That way, he will consider granting the ability to the boy. The problem is that this is unattainable. All he can manage is 100 shots in a single day. But the comedian doesn't want to hear excuses, and as soon as he accomplishes that, he must return. After speaking, he snapped his fingers. The boy was sent back into his body. Realizing that besides being funny, the comedian is a bit cruel. He soon realized that to use the ability, he will need to triple his current magical power. The problem is that this might not be possible. The predecessors agree that this is an impossible challenge. There's no way for the boy to increase his magical power that much. But they are interested in seeing the boy's progress. After all, he can't become stronger. He won't be able to win. The protagonist went to the forest. There he began to fire his shots, defeating some creatures. That isn't too difficult to do. But the workload is truly exhausting. The only way to increase his magical power is by hunting creatures. So he will hunt everything he can find. His friends are impressed with his strength. It was good that they came along too. Everyone wants to get stronger. That's how she convinced Line to go as well. The desire to become stronger is greater than the fear. The protagonist truly has good friends that contributes to his progress. After firing 100 shots, he felt drained, but by hunting, he increased his power slightly. But it still wasn't enough. That progress is far from ideal. Then he heard a terrifying roar in the forest that didn't seem to have come from an orc. It could be that his friends are in danger. Finally, the protagonist found the creature. It was lying on the ground as if sleeping. Beside its body were his two friends, celebrating what they had managed to do. The girl praised Bell's work. Even he was curious to know if his friends had defeated that creature. And that was exactly what happened. That was a sea-level creature. He thought his friends were at a lower level. Since they wouldn't be able to defeat it normally, they came up with an efficient strategy. First, they surrounded the enemy with ice. Then the girl attacked with her sound waves, which were reflected by the ice around them. It was truly an impressive plan. Those two have an interesting synergy. That was the result of their combined attack. And the protagonist had an idea too. Now he knows how he will be able to fire more shots. Meanwhile, more creatures had appeared. Several orcs like the one that had been defeated. A large group like that is going to be very problematic because they are all very tired. But the protagonist has a brilliant idea. He can still keep fighting. They would never have imagined that the protagonist was capable of doing all that. Seeing that he left in a hurry, the girl remembered that he had something to do. The predecessors did not expect the boy to return so quickly. The comedian hopes he is not trying to change the terms of the agreement. But the boy said he had already completed the task, something that left them quite astonished. It is not possible that he did that in just one day. The comedian stated that he is the one who makes jokes there, but the boy remained firm. They asked him to show in a battle when it changed. He would have to fire all those shots during a fight and could use other weapons if he wanted to. Unless, of course, he was afraid. But the protagonist liked that challenge a lot. He just needed the signal to be given, and the battle would begin. They are properly prepared, and the comedian is eager to see that progress. The elder gave the starting signal. Bell already had his pistol in hand, but the comedian had already fired the first shot, which hit the boy. He said the boy was too slow and needed to improve on that. As expected from the original user of that weapon, he is much faster. It seems that the comedian is in his 100 jokes mode, and the protagonist does not want to lose that duel. The two fired several times, leaving the comedian quite impressed. Charlotte said the boy was very good, and now she understood why the elder decided to train him. Indeed, he is very proud of his pupil. The shy one said that the real battle had yet to begin, and Charlotte did not like his tone of voice. But he reminded them that they needed to see if the boy was still capable of firing shots. Even Adam agreed. 100 shots would not be enough. And the boy continued to push himself hard, but that was still not challenging for the comedian. They continued firing several shots. A little more tired, he was losing his rhythm. Adam had counted them all, and the boy had fired 97 shots. Seeing that the battle was becoming uninteresting, the comedian was about to end it. But the protagonist had a trump card. He summoned the powerful shield. That way, he would be able to protect himself a little more. That made the comedian rethink his strategy. The boy was going to use the wind as well, making the wind pass through the pistol. And the comedian wanted to know what he intended to do with that. The protagonist said those bullets were useless. He managed to strengthen his shot with the wind, surpassing the comedian's strength, who was quite surprised by that result. That combination allows him to increase his power even if he has little magical energy. For the first time, the comedian had been pressured in this battle. Not even the boy's mentor had thought of that possibility. Charlotte is cheering for him, hoping he can defeat the comedian. The comedian wanted to know why the boy had not used that strategy from the beginning, reminding him that he had fallen into a trap before, and now was time to return the favor. But hiding that ability might not change things. Now the boy needed to dodge all those shots, and the battle became much more balanced again, because the protagonist was able to hit the comedian's first shot, since his magical power was also running low, while the boy continued firm in his strategy. The situation had become quite complicated. His opponent was being pressured. It was time to end this. But the comedian is not an easy enemy to defeat. He hid behind his flames, preventing the boy from knowing his true position, besides not knowing where the shots were coming from. He was soon hit in the back, which gave him a clue about the comedian's location. But he had already repositioned himself, hitting the boy once again. All he needed to do was keep hiding within the flames, because the protagonist had been completely cornered. He needed to push away those flames using the wind, and that was exactly what he did to find the comedian, who could no longer hide behind the flames. Now he had a clear view to hit his target, but he was unable to fire any shots. This situation was definitely complicated. The other predecessors suspected that he might have exhausted his magical power, becoming completely vulnerable to the comedian. But the comedian had also run out of bullets. The final impact occurred, causing the comedian to fall to his knees. He had been pushed to his limit, just like the boy in that duel, who had managed to fire 301 shots. After that, he was completely drained. He had won by a very small margin. Seeing the protagonist's effort, the comedian was very happy, extending his hand to him. He had finally approved him and would unlock the unique ability of his weapon. Very politely, he helped the boy stand up again, who was very grateful to have been recognized. He needed to perfect his knowledge of that divine weapon. Receiving another ability, he is confident that he can defeat that other bastard. All the comedian genuinely wants is for his pupil to win this battle, and he assured that he would bring victory. A few days pass, and the protagonist continued training in the forest, because it is essential for him to keep getting stronger. Little by little, he is further refining his mastery of his ability. His friends approached to see what happened. That unique ability of his is truly impressive. The girl asked if he could give them some tips so they could learn as well. All he could say was for them to keep defeating monsters. That is the only path he knows. But he knows a training method to enhance the power they already have and to practice it every day. He learned it from his master. They need to sit down, close their eyes, and concentrate. Making that symbolic hand gesture, this is the easiest way to circulate magical power through the body. By practicing that meditation for an hour a day, magical power can grow more quickly. Besides helping to refine it, making it easier to release power during battle, they decided they would try to do that too. This practice does not bring immediate results, but in the long run, it is very effective. His friends began circulating magic through their bodies. The protagonist noticed that they had progressed too quickly. Perhaps their progress is far above average. He couldn't afford to fall behind, so he decided he would keep training. That would also contribute to strengthening his unique ability. But 5 days passed, and the group of friends kept training. After 10 days, they were already dueling each other to become even stronger. A total of 20 days passed, and they continued training diligently. After a month, they met with the bastard again. This time, he did not come alone to take his sister. It had been a while since they last saw each other. Even the girl had become stronger. The bastard ordered his servant to take the girl, as he would handle this nuisance. The servant understood his orders, but the girl was not going to make that task easy at all, immediately attacking him with her divine weapon. But the servant was fast enough to dodge those attacks. Lime would not let her friend fight alone, charging at that servant fiercely. He would not allow her to be taken from Alice in a fight. On the other side, it was time for the protagonist to settle his matters. He had just one question before that, which he wanted to ask. What was that guy going to do with his own sister? Her divine weapon is special, passed down through generations, capable of controlling people through sound. That way, she could turn people into battle instruments, making war much easier. That is truly a despicable goal. He just wants to make his life easier. His sister is nothing more than a mere tool to him. The protagonist does not need any further explanation, because that guy is not worthy of being called a brother. He warned that anger would not make that weapon work against him. But that is exactly what they were about to see. He found the protagonist's stance strange, because the pistol was pointed at its own user, who began using his unique ability. The flames were directed at his own heart. They now enveloped his entire body. That is the soul incineration, an impressive technique. Even though he was not impressed, the bastard acknowledged that this was going to be troublesome. The protagonist had become much stronger, and wings emerged from his back. With that, all of his physical attributes were enhanced. He is now able to approach his enemy much more quickly. All the bastard did was fire a few shots, but that was completely useless. because his flames can burn all that blood, something the bastard was not expecting. It was time for the protagonist to kill him until nothing was left. Preparing without stopping to land a punch on him, the bastard immediately produced a shield for his protection, which was able to withstand the first impact. But shattered the way it did, it would not be able to stop the second. That way, the protagonist managed to hit him in the face, sending the poor fool's body flying away. The blood he has now is completely useless. He should just give up and go home. But that is not all he has to show. The bastard had stood up again. His eyes had completely transformed as well. The surface of his skin had undergone a transformation. It felt as though his blood had started boiling. With that form, he had become much more powerful, and the protagonist could not tell what that was. That was dragon blood. That ability transformed his entire body. He now looked like a dragon. His power had grown significantly. That pressure is really problematic. He warned the protagonist that he should feel proud of it and regret it at the same time. His sharp claws were already prepared, because he was about to feel his full fury now. Bell paid close attention to his opponent's advance. With his enhanced abilities, he was able to dodge it. Even so, he was superficially cut. His opponent was intrigued. He thought he had hit the target. While he was thinking, the protagonist prepared an attack, launching his flames at him. He managed to hit him precisely. Now he would make everything explode into the air. The resulting destruction was truly impressive. A lot of smoke had risen into the air, but his opponent seemed completely unscathed. He said that attack had been completely pathetic. The scales on his body remained clean. There were no signs or traces of soot or burns. He charged at the protagonist, ready to slice him apart. Just fire would not be enough for this opponent, so he decided he would crush him with his fists. The two were on a collision course. Bell had to dodge those claws once again. Only then would he have a chance to strike, landing a hit on his opponent's side. Feeling the impact on his own skin, he was not impressed in the slightest. Those scales were also very resistant to impact. The protagonist got distracted by his thoughts, being caught off guard by the dragon's tail, which hurled him toward the ground, while his opponent prepared a powerful spell to annihilate him. Bell knew he needed to defend himself immediately, sending a fireball to avoid being hit. But his opponent's attack was much more devastating. A great explosion occurred in the air. The boy appeared to be very exhausted. Even though he was persistent, he was clearly at his limit, and the dragon was capable of making several of those attacks. That would make things much more complicated for him, because the protagonist needed to use even more of his magical power. And on the ground, his friends were engaged in another battle. Their enemy was probably at level B. They decided they would execute a combined attack. The silent enemy just waited for their movement. Lime was the first to advance, forcing his opponent to defend himself. The boy had driven his spear into the ground. That made his opponent slightly cautious, finally realizing that he had been surrounded by ice walls. This was the girl's time to act. She was already approaching, sending powerful sound waves at her opponent. That combination had been enough to defeat a monster stronger than them, so they believed the battle would be over. But the knight said all of that was completely useless. He struck his staff against the ground. A dark and mysterious circle appeared, completely absorbing the sound waves of the attack, until absolutely nothing remained. An unexpected result for the kids, still with his staff resting on the ground. He prepared an attack capable of annihilating them. The dark portal grew larger and larger, releasing the absorbed sound waves. Thanks to his absorption, those attacks were now completely useless. The girl was still processing what had happened. The knight apologized to her, but said he had to take her since he had received orders from his master. Lime was not going to let that happen, and the knight warned the boy not to interfere. But he would never listen to those words, so he needed to be subdued. He was still very inexperienced in combat. The girl saw that her friend was also struggling. Knowing she needed to help him, she became desperate because she couldn't move her body. Meanwhile, the boy continued to be brutally beaten. She only wished she had a little more strength to resist. She remembered the protagonist's words that training would help her release power in battle. She just needed to calm herself down. That way, she would be able to focus on the magical power within her body. Believing she could fight, she was ready to save her friend. His skull was about to be completely crushed by that staff, but the sound waves flew through the air. Lime managed to react in time. It was not yet time for him to be defeated, and the poor knight was quite puzzled by what was happening. That was the result of the sound produced by the girl. Lime could hear her friend perfectly. The music she played was beautiful, and that music transformed into strength in the boy's body, who was now able to pressure his opponent, managing to throw him off balance. The knight did not know where that child had drawn so much strength from. His divine weapon shone intensely, ready to freeze him. Ice plates emerged from the ground, advancing toward the knight, who was certain he was in trouble. He would not be able to absorb all of that, being completely engulfed by the ice. In the air, the protagonist was already nearing his limit. The battle was about to end. But he saw that his friends had succeeded. Now all that remains is to defeat the bastard standing before his eyes. What he will do now is a gamble because he will use his hidden trump card. The dragon was intrigued to realize that the boy was still hiding his strength, but that wouldn't make a difference because he was about to experience true despair. The battle between the two intensified even more, because the dragon was also increasing his power, about to unleash a devastating attack. The protagonist knew that his opponent was about to launch his most powerful strike, but he also had something to do. For it to work, he just needed to survive. The dragon had finally completed the charging phase of his ability, unleashing all of his power against the protagonist. That energy sphere was truly enormous. an unexpected size that could make things even more difficult. The boy needed to act fast to avoid being defeated. The only thing he had was that attack, launching his flames to prevent being hit. But the dragon continued generating even more power, a force that the protagonist could not withstand. He had been overpowered by his opponent. It seemed that the battle was finally over. That was not the ending the dragon had hoped for. He wanted something more thrilling. Only then did he realize that the protagonist had appeared behind him. He had been distracted and had not paid attention to his own defense. While he was charging all that power, the boy had created a clone from his own flames, which had been destroyed by the dragon, an ability he never expected the protagonist to master. Feeling confident, he believed the protagonist couldn't harm him because his attacks were weak. It was time for him to show the progress of his training, because through it, he had perfected his mastery of magic. The dragon sensed that the boy's arm was coated in mana. His attacks may not have worked so far, but that punch was going to be different. Looking back, the dragon realized that it was quite dangerous. Those blue flames were the boy's trump card, striking his enemy's back with his glorious fist, causing him intense and agonizing pain, strong enough to shatter the dragon's scales. It was impossible that he had been defeated by a child. After some time, he managed to open his eyes. His body was completely immobilized by ice. He and his servant had been defeated. It took a while, but they eventually regained consciousness. The dragon thought he would be bothered by the kids, but since he had been defeated, it didn't bother him. There was something the girl wanted to say to him. She would not let him start a war, she would not be his tool, and he had better understand that. Unexpectedly, he seemed to agree. He would do exactly as the girl asked. Such strange words for them to hear, leaving them doubtful. Even so, Lime dispelled her divine weapon, making the ice disappear. The girl asked him not to come see her again. Without answering her, he simply told his mate to accompany him. The two were now leaving. That battle had been exhausting for everyone, and it was impressive that the protagonist had been able to defeat a member of the student council. He said it was by a narrow margin. The girl stood up to speak with her friends, and one day she would repay all that kindness. But they were friends, and that's not how things worked. Hearing that, she made sure to correct it. They were best friends. Words that made the protagonist very happy. After this battle, they might be targeted by other members of the student council. So he needed to become even stronger, especially against Albert, because he didn't want another tragedy to happen again. He would become the strongest here and show everyone his power. Eventually, he would defeat his brother and become the head of the family. This time, he would definitely be able to protect his sister. Many years passed and a battle was about to begin. The protagonist had finally found his brother, but now he was much stronger. Besides having become the head of the family, Jin didn't seem to care about titles. He said a curse was upon his little brother. In his past life, he learned that it was a shame not to be able to protect those he loved. The suffering he felt that day was truly intense. That's why he was in this place now. Knowing true pain, there was no enemy he couldn't defeat. His sister's fate was at stake. Mufasa and Scar were about to enter combat, and the protagonist believed he was going to change his entire destiny, attacking his brother with all the power he had.